We are at quorum.
Great. All right, let's get started. So welcome everybody to the July meeting of Community Board 8. And just at the outset here, just remind everybody to please be civil and collegial as always. And also we have pretty full agenda. So if folks can be brief with their comments and just try and keep their comments pithy and to the point, I think that will help us get through the meeting relatively quickly and not have it drag on into the night. So I would encourage folks to do that, not to repeat things that others have said, and so forth. And so with that, I will turn it over to Will, who will go over some of the mechanics and things for the public session.
Sure. Well, welcome everyone. If this is your first time joining us, you will notice that everyone is muted and everyone will stay muted except for whenever we go through the list of names who signed up for the public session. If you have signed up for the public session as you signed in for this meeting, your name will appear in a list that we can see. And whenever Russell calls your name, it would help us out to find you. If you will raise your virtual hand. You can raise your virtual hand by going to the reactions icon at the bottom of your screen and pressing the raise hand button there. It's not the wave or the thumbs up. Those are not as helpful. Only press it once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. And if you're calling in from the phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. And be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting whenever Russell calls on you and we unmute you. If you're having problems, you can use the chat for technical support only. It is only to help with Zoom software. It is not to ask questions of anyone and is not to share your opinions. No one will ever see those. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you need to go to the participants section where you can raise your hand there. And finally, we encourage you not to raise your actual hand or wave at the screen because it's hard to find you and we may miss you. So if you've signed up for the public session, be on the lookout for that.
Great. And you have till 6:45 to speak in the public session. So, okay, to sign up to speak in the public session. So let's go right into the public session then. And the first speaker that we have is Matt Bauer.
Thanks, Matt. Normally we have a 2-minute timer that would show on the screen, but right now we're having some technical difficulties. So we'll have a 2-minute timer and I will just interrupt you whenever you hit 2 minutes.
Thanks so much. I'm Matt Bauer. I'm the director of the Madison Avenue Business Improvement District. And good to see you all. I just want to give you a brief Madison Avenue update. Just a few minutes ago, I came back from visiting the opening of the new Wolford flagship on Madison Avenue at 609. It's between 5-7 and 5-8. Wonderful reception they're having actually right now. Last week, Isabel Marant, which has long been on 67th and Madison, has opened up a brand new, much larger flagship store at 677 Madison Avenue, which is great. Encourage you to visit. We also, in the last couple of weeks, Chloe, which had a store on Madison, opened up again at 715 Madison Avenue. ALC, the Los Angeles-based brand, opened up their store at 1015 Madison. We have 2 summer pop-ups that hopefully will go a little longer than the summer, but Jonathan Cohen, a very creative, artistic brand, and both of fashion and home goods at 833 Madison Avenue. ADM, which is at 770 Madison Avenue, is celebrating their 10th anniversary with a special pop-up with designer Carolyn Murphy, celebrating Japanese culture and sustainability. We're very pleased to be partnering with the Ronald McDonald House, New York, on the Heroes on the Avenue block party taking place on 68th Street on Saturday, August 13th, day of the second Summer Streets. And looking forward to the fall when we have our Madison Avenue Men's Style Month with over 30 participating brands in partnership with the Journal. And just if you want to see a list of all the new stores, just visit any of our information boxes and you'll see our Madison Avenue map and guide, which has a list of all the stores on Madison Avenue. You can also find them at the concierge desk of your favorite hotels. So wishing you all a great summer. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. And now we have our timer back. So going forward, you will see a timer on your screen.
All right, next we will go to Elaine Walsh.
Go ahead, Elaine, you can unmute.
Thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of the East 86th Street Association, and we are here to oppose the district mapping put out by the commission, and we support the resolution that will come forward from the community task force. Our concerns are that we need a city council member who is invested in the Upper East Side. The ULUP process, the 210 and special districts rezoning, as well as landmarks, are key to our community and our quality of life. Our experience has been that Queens District Council people have not supported the Upper East Side, and it was very relevant when we did the Blood Center Longfellow, and our own council member opposed it, but nobody else did. We're also concerned about the loss of affordable housing. The section on York from 79th South down to 77th, as well as in the 60s, are parts of our affordable housing. Our goal is to keep and have more affordable housing. This redistricting, again, takes away from our community and gives the impression that we do not support affordable housing. So we are very concerned about that. And we also want to comment that we thought that the district lines for Council District 4 were quite unusual, and that needs to be looked at. But we oppose losing our eastern part of the community to Queens, where we do not have a relationship whatsoever. And I know the task force will be talking in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Sharon Pope Marshall.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much, Russell, and thank you, Will. My name is Sharon Pope Marshall. I am here on behalf of Civitas, and we are in full support of the board's resolution, earlier resolution to keep Council District 5 whole. And what that means is not having a carve out on the Upper East Side, and also keeping Roosevelt Island as part of Community District 5. The redistricting or the districting commission has approximately 4 goals in looking at how council districts are rearranged, if you will. And one of those goals, I believe that they violated it, which is that communities that have historically been linked should continue to be linked. And obviously that's the case for the Upper East Side, and also that has been the case for Roosevelt Island, whose moniker is Manhattan's Other Island. Civitas very much supports the board's resolution on this matter. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Ellen Polivy, please.
Ellen, if you are here, please raise your hand so we can find you. I'm not seeing her, so we maybe need to come back to her.
Okay, Barry Schneider is, let's go to Barry.
Go ahead, Barry.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Regarding the districting issue, I'm appalled that the commission was blind to the communities of interest that abound in CD5. There are several well-established neighborhood associations whose membership will be torn asunder. A number of neighborhood schools, several beloved public parks will be torn away. Bedpan Alley, whose personnel live in CD5, will in the future be represented by a council member on the other side of the East River. I urge the community to strongly object to this ill-conceived plan. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next we will go to Erica Burson, please.
I'm sorry, repeat that name.
Erica Burson.
I see an Erica. Thank you, Erica. Go ahead and unmute.
Thank you, Russell. I want to echo what the previous speakers have said. I moved from the Upper West Side to this District 5 last year on purpose. And with the way the current lines are drawn, I remain in District 5 by half a block, but that other half a block away encompasses all of the hospitals. So to live in a neighborhood or community where we don't have say over half a block away is not right. In terms of the five key requirements that are included in the redistricting committee, as well as the New York City Charter, it's keeping neighborhoods and communities intact, keeping districts compact, limit crossover districts, avoid splitting voters of the same political party for purposes of diminishing effective representation of such voters, and avoid oddly shaped districts. I don't think anybody can argue that they did not follow any of the guidelines or policies that were set forth by their own committee. And I know that the community board will do the right thing and oppose the current draft. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Lo Vandervalk.
Lo, you can unmute. There you go.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. My name is Lo Vandervalk. I'm representing Carnegie Hill Neighbors. I'd like to speak to the revocable consent application for 890 Park. we're very much, Carnegie Hill Neighbors is very much against this because of its incursion into the sidewalk of Park Avenue. But that's a 15-foot sidewalk observed everywhere on Park, with the exception of old churches, churches built a long time ago. So not many, but just a few. However, this is for an individual house. It will come out 5 feet of a 15-foot sidewalk. We would agree to a modification where there is less penetration into the sidewalk, say 2 feet less than what is proposed. And we think that could be possible with some work by architects. Also note that that application was disapproved by the Landmarks Committee in August of 2015. So the time lapse, I think, is very troubling. I don't know what the vote of the full board was, but it was turned down by the Landmarks Committee 7-1. I also want to speak on a second application occurring on Fifth Avenue, 1014 Fifth Avenue, the former Goethe House. There's a proposal for a penetration of the sidewalk, which is quite substantial, creating sort of a cement enclosure of benching, cement benching, that also penetrates more than about 4.5 feet of the usual observed 15-foot sidewalk on Fifth Avenue outside of the greenery. So those are my 2 oppositions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Michelle Birnbaum.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Because I want this on the record, I'm reporting tonight on the extension of the Summer Streets program, which had called for closing streets in Lower Manhattan, along with street closures on Park Avenue up to 72nd Street, and now has been extended to include Park Avenue street closures north to at least 89th Street from Fridays 11 p.m. through Saturdays 2 p.m. on August 5, 6, 12, 13, and 1920. While the 72nd Street border was in place since the program's inception and was presented to the community board at that time, these additional streets were added without the knowledge of either the community board or any of the residents along the avenue and the side streets. No matter what your opinion is of the program, it is important to note that Park Avenue above 72nd Street is solely residential. And these residents should have not only been notified, but should have had input as to whether they wanted this program, which eliminates parking for over a mile, encourages play and game street structures, cycling and group games, and begins activity at 7 a.m. on a weekend morning. Thousands of people live on this street or Park Avenue, and not to have sought their input was a terrible disservice to this community and this community board, which prides itself on posting every issue discussed in every committee, which would have impact on residents and immediate neighbors. For this protocol not to have been followed here is inexplicable. I have spoken to a representative at the DOT to voice my dismay and hope that the plan can be reversed this year, and that if it were to be proposed again next year, that the community be noticed and their opinions be heard. If you share my concerns and my view, please email the DOT and let them know. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, let's go to Dove Gabor, please.
Hello. Apologies. Yeah, hi. Apologies, I'm a little hoarse as I'm currently battling COVID. I unfortunately, because I was so sick yesterday, couldn't attend the voter reform meeting, but in looking at the minutes, I believe that the committee may have misread the map. They indicated that the York Library and Eleanor Roosevelt High School are moved to CD 26, but in my look at the map, and I could be corrected, but I believe the line from 79th to 73rd Street is York Avenue, not First Avenue. They, again, just going from the minutes, appear to have read that line as First Avenue. And so I just wanted to make sure that that was corrected in the resolution. That said, I do agree with them that these lines are inappropriate and that that whole section of Manhattan, including Roosevelt Island, should be kept contiguous to CD5 and not shifted into the proposed CD26 as part of Queens. Again, looking at the map overall for the city, My read is that 4 districts are spanning multiple boroughs from Manhattan into the Bronx and Manhattan into Queens and Brooklyn. If one of the goals is to reduce the number of districts that are spanning multiple boroughs, I don't see why there needs to be 4. I think they should be able to reduce that. It may mean shifting more of the lines internal within Manhattan. But I definitely think since that is one of the goals, it could be something that the committee could include. Excuse me. So just wanted to make sure that we had accurate information going to the resolution, and as well to voice my, again, opposition to the proposed lines. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will double check that. Next, let's go to Andrew Ravishir.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak, and thank you to everyone both last night and today who has spoken up against these proposed council lines. I especially want to thank Elaine Walsh because she mentioned all the affordable housing in the 60s and the lower 70s on York Avenue that would no longer be a part of the district. And I think it's very intentionally not a part of the district. This is an area where real estate developers would really love to knock down these buildings and build properties that are luxury properties right nearby water and medical institutions. And therefore, if there's a city council person who has our district, sure, but also in Queens, they're going to be happy to move that development over to this area. And so I'm really happy that there's a lot of pushback against these lines. And just a reminder, part of the reason we're so worried about our preservation of affordable housing is that our supply is extremely, extremely limited. There is room in Manhattan and even in our district to build more housing without knocking down the limited actual affordable housing that we have. And I'm sure we're all either in front of our floor fans or we're, you know, if we're lucky, in air conditioners, air-conditioned rooms. But climate change pollution, 67 to 75% of it in the city comes from our tall buildings. And it's not getting any better, especially with the proliferation of these monster talls. Today is in the 90s. We're going to be in an immense heat wave for the next week or so, and it's only going to become more and more common as we twiddle our thumbs and do not handle climate change. And part of that means not developing buildings that consume massive amounts of energy, both in terms of construction, but then in terms of operation. So it is imperative to save our affordable housing, to also save our climate, that we have proper zoning in place so that greedy real estate interests cannot buy us out or buy our elected representatives out. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, let's go back to Ellen Pallaby, please.
Hi. Okay, I am speaking on against the proposed rezoning of Roosevelt Island, Queens for the city council. I think what's going on is they're trying to make one large district for institutions, you know, Cornell, the hospitals, the university, the college that's in Queens, and it is totally leaving out the gerrymandering the Roosevelt Islanders out of existence. We won't have any representation in city council, particularly. We can't get there. We can't, there's no transportation to that part of Queens. You know, we've been part of Manhattan for a very long time and always. And, you know, we have all our representation in Manhattan, not to mention the community coalition on Roosevelt Island fought really hard for benefits for through the city council for benefits for Cornell to be able to build there. And the city council was instrumental in making that happen. So we have a lease with the city, you know, our benefits are in the lease with the city, and the city council member is the person that's supposed to help us fight for that. If we lose that representation, then we lose our clout with Cornell. So I hope the community board will fight really hard to maintain Roosevelt Island city council membership and, you know, city council representation in Manhattan. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that concludes the public session. So we will move on with the agenda. The next item is adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to do that? You can do it with the thumbs up button.
Rebecca?
Michelle and Rebecca. So we got a second. Anyone opposed to adoption of the agenda? Seeing none, it is adopted. And adoption of the prior month's minutes. Same deal. You can do it with a thumbs up. Yep, we got it. Anyone opposed? No? Excellent. All right, so let us move now. We are going to skip the Borough President's report for now and do the elected official reports. So representatives, please raise your hands and we will call on you for your 2 minutes. And we will start with Audrey Tannen.
Go ahead, Audrey.
Great. Hi, everyone. Happy summer. A few announcements from Liz. I know you have a long meeting tonight. So number one, tomorrow we're hosting a virtual town hall on safe streets, a nice follow-up to your Transportation Committee's discussion last Tuesday. At that panel, we will have CB8's own Transportation Committee member, Paul Crickler, DOT Manhattan Commissioner Ed Pinkar, and representatives from the 19th precinct. We've already gotten a very, very enthusiastic response, so we know there's a lot of interest in the community on this topic, which I know you all know too. And number two is the city council budget and the education portion of it. Liz usually stays out of these things, but she was as concerned and confused as many were about the lack of funding for a lot of our schools. I think maybe things have gotten resolved. There's going to be a renegotiation of that. However, I will share with you in the chat the letter Liz did write to the mayor and the council speaker addressing her concerns about the issue. And number three, global. It's a global issue, it's a national issue, and we're all experiencing it, and that's climate change. And Liz has been trying to bring real, to confront this issue on a state level. Her latest attempt at doing this was something she announced along with her co-sponsor and colleague, the Assembly member, Jeffrey Dinowitz. They posted an op-ed in the Daily News on Monday about what the state can do to help us address some of these issues, which again, we all are seeing and feeling. I will post that in the chat as well in case you missed it. Happy summer to all, and no pun intended, stay cool, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Next, let's go to Terrell Brock.
Terrell, you need to hit the unmute button, and then we'll start your timer. Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. This is Terrell Brock, and I'm a community liaison from State Senator Jose Serrano's office. Recently, the United Court ruled on cases that can have major implications for people in New York and across the nation. In overturning Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court ended nearly 50 years of judicial precedent that protected a woman's right to a safe and legal abortion. In New York, we have taken legislative action to protect a woman's right to reproductive health care. In 2019, the Democratic Senate majority passed the Reproductive Health Act to codify Roe versus Wade into New York City law. In addition, the senator and his colleagues have enacted new laws to protect patients who travel to New York for reproductive health care from states that have taken away those rights, as well as medical professionals who provide those services. Some examples of the legislation I referred to is S9039A, the Freedom from Interference with Reproductive and Endocrine Health Advocacy and Travel Exercise Act, which will protect the rights of individuals seeking abortion case or gender affirming care in New York. There's S9384A. This legislation extends the address confidentiality program to protect reproductive health care and healthcare providers and patients. And last week, the state legislature reconvened in an extraordinary session to pass a legislative package that will amend New York state laws to restrict where individuals may carry concealed weapons, safe storage laws, and prohibiting the purchase of most types of body armor. Concealed carry firearms will not be permitted in most public schools like hospitals, nursing homes, schools, movie theaters, and gathering spaces such as Times Square.
Thank you. Next, let's go to Ben Jacobs.
Hi, I'm Ben Jacobs. I'm the Chief of Staff for Councilmember Keith Powers. Just wanted to give a quick update. I know you guys have a busy meeting ahead of you. And if, in case anyone has managed not to go outside today, congrats. It is hot out. It is going to be hot for the next 5 days. The city has cooling centers set up, and they have a map at maps.nyc.gov/cooling-center. And that has a map of all the cooling centers available. If you know someone who is in need of relief, who might not have air conditioning in their home, who just needs to have a space where they can get cooler. And I believe the Petco on 86 and Lex is a pet-friendly cooling center. I was gonna bring up Summer Streets, but that was already mentioned. So I'll skip that. Councilmember Powers did a COVID test giveaway with the East 86th Street Association a couple weeks ago. We're looking to do with cases rising. We're looking to do some more of those over the course of the summer. So if you have interest, please let us know. We have tests, we have masks, those sorts of things. The council, as Audrey from Senator Kruger's office mentioned, the council's actively engaged in negotiations with the mayor on the Department of Education budget. I'd stay tuned for updates on that, hopefully very soon. Councilmember Powers sent a letter along with 40 of his colleagues and the speaker to the mayor demanding that the federal funds that the city has be used to cover up that education shortfall. And I also just want to let folks know, because I've heard from a few people in our office about this, about the milling and the milling and paving on 72nd Street. That is scheduled for Monday, in case folks are interested. DOT posts the milling and the repaving schedule weekly. And with my last 6 seconds, I will say happy belated birthday to your district manager, Will Brightfield. Thanks so much. Have a good night.
Thanks, Ben. And congrats on the promotion.
All right, next, let's go to Cameron Kaufman.
Thank you. My name is Cameron Kaufman. I'm the Director of Constituent Services for Councilmember Julie Menin. I want to start by talking about the redistricting plans. Our office was on the voting reform task force call last night, and we have been spreading the word to the community about opportunities to testify in front of the districting commission. It's going to be in August, and it can also be emailed. Obviously, the draft proposal broke up communities of interest in an unprecedented way, and we encourage residents to testify on that, talking about communities of interest over the next course of a few months as the district commission takes community feedback in. A couple other things I want to talk about. A couple weeks ago, the council member conducted a walkthrough of the 7-year now project, the DDC water main project on 61st, 62nd, 63rd, and York Avenue. We've received many complaints and concerns about it. We're working on some expediting as well as some mitigation manners. You might have noticed that the fence has now been wrapped. There's going to be some more kind of paneling and aesthetic improvements coming up, but we're also working with the administration to push Con Ed, because this project is already about 2 years behind schedule and still seems that progress is slow. Another thing, the council member introduced her universal child care bills a couple weeks ago. We'll be one of the first major city in America to get universal child care. And it's really critical. It's a matter of gender equity and a matter of economic development, allowing women to be a part of the workforce. Last week, the council member, along with council member Chris Marte, introduced 3 bills to regulate rapid grocery delivery services, GoPuff, Gorillas, those sorts of companies, and making sure that dark stores were not popping up in our community as they're proliferating. In my last 10 seconds, I'll say you can stop by our office now and make an appointment, 444 East 75th Street and York Avenue, and reach us at 212-860-1950.
Thank you. Next, let's go to Courtney.
Hi there, good evening, and thank you. On behalf of Assemblymember Seawright, we're proud to announce the passage of our Equality Amendment during the special session. Thanks to the support of Governor Hochul, Speaker Hasty, Senate Majority Leader Stuart Cousins, and of course, Senator Krueger and advocates. Constitutional amendment requires passage in 2 successive sessions of the legislature before it can be on the ballot for New Yorkers to vote on the proposal. Included in the amendment is language to provide for reproductive autonomy, the power to decide and control one's own contraceptive use, pregnancy, and childbearing. For example, people with reproductive autonomy can control the choices during a pregnancy, abortion, and decisions in childbirth. She dedicated her vote to her mentor and former employer, Sarah Weddington, who died late last year and was the lead attorney in the Roe v. Wade case. We're seeing that our rights are not guaranteed, and we must have an equal rights amendment on the state and federal levels. The special session also addressed the overturning of New York's concealed carry law and passing common sense gun laws. As always, please consider our office a resource. We're at 1485 York Avenue between 78th and 79th Streets. Give us a call at 212-288-4607 or email us at seawrightr@nyassembly.gov. And I will put our contact information in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, we will move now to the chair's report. So I'll be pretty brief. First of all, we had a great tango lesson organized by the Arts Committee back on June 24th. So I just want to thank the committee again for putting that together, and to everybody who attended, and also for Will and the rest of the staff for all their help as well. And Will was actually there to help set it up. So thank you guys, and thanks everyone for attending that. And then just the last thing that I will say is, again, another reminder, just if everyone at the meeting can try to be as concise in your comments as possible. Don't repeat points, that were made during the committee meetings. And I would say if it seems like there's going to be broad agreement on something, it may be that we can just sort of move to voting on it. So that's my encouragement to you all. In addition, again, to being civil and collegial. And with that, I will turn it over to Will for his report.
Thanks. One of the elected official reports mentioned the milling and paving schedule. A byproduct of our recent transportation committee meeting was that we are going to start putting those schedules in our weekly This Week at CB8 e-blast. So you can look for those there, but then they are always subject to change. If you have any events that you would like to be featured that are community-based events, you can always send those to me to put those into our newsletter as well. And then finally, there's a new episode of CB8 Speaks that is up on our website featuring Civitas Executive Director and CB8 board member, Sharon Pope Marshall. It's worth checking out. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Russell.
Thank you. All right, so let's get going with our committee reports. And the first one is the report of the Voting Reform Task Force. So I will turn it over to Anthony and Sherry.
Great. Thank you, Russell. Unmute yourself, Sherry.
Unmuted and changed. So last evening we had one of our continual meeting on the New York City Districting Commission. On Friday, a map was released with a new proposal, which basically takes 54 streets from the easternland border of the Upper East Side. So York and First, it kind of varies as you go up the side, and also Roosevelt Island, and moves both of those over to Queens District 26. The purpose of the meeting last night was to get input from people how this change would affect them. So people were asked to give us comments on how they felt this change, what this change would mean to them. And people were really quite helpful in putting together the material. So we put together Anthony took the comments, Anthony volunteered to do the minutes, and I did the resolution. But because of the fact that this was such a quick turnaround, we didn't finish the meeting last night till 10 o'clock, and we had to get the minutes and the resolution to Will this morning. What we decided to do was I put together, if you looked at the resolution, I tried to include as many of the comments as I could from the meeting. But because of the quick turnaround, it was decided we would like, and how important it is that this resolution really speaks strongly for our opposition. It was decided that we're asking the board to approve the resolution in spirit and to allow Anthony and I and Russell and other members of the task force to kind of tweak the resolution. Now we heard that one of the schools that we were told was affected is not. So we really need to go back and really fine tune the resolution. But again, because of the fact that there was so little time to put this together, we don't consider it in final form. So the resolution in spirit was passed unanimously by people that we had a huge turnout. We had 45 people on the call last night. So what we are asking the board to do is also to approve the resolution, again, knowing that it will be tweaked. So we would have the authority to testify at the public hearings. As Cameron said, they'll be in August. We don't know the date yet for Manhattan, but we need the board to authorize us to do that. So with that, I'd like to put the resolution before the board. I guess, is there a second?
It doesn't need to be. It's already
okay.
up, so you don't have to second
Okay,
it.
so I guess. what
Just
is
a
it
couple
take?
of things, Sherry.
Anthony, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I think it's important for all of us to understand the process. If we don't, and I certainly didn't when we started this, the redistricting for the city council is based on the 2020 census. And since the charter limits the number of city council districts, that means that every 10 years they have to be reshuffled because the average number of people in the 51 districts in this case is increased. So there are a number of redistricting requirements and recommendations that are in the minutes. And I think have been alluded to by some of the people in the public session, but I think it's important to get a sense of the timeline that we were provided last night. This first draft was issued on Friday. It is there will be hearings sometime in August. We don't know when. After August 15th was what we heard last night. The second draft redistricting plan is due to be issued on September 22nd, after which time the city council votes on it. Now, the city council apparently has never accepted a draft plan. So it goes back to the committee, hopefully, yet again. There are more hearings, and then the commission will issue its final plan without having to go back to city council. So essentially, there will be two more hearing periods, although obviously the first one is the most critical. I think that was the most important issue. If everyone reads the minutes carefully, they'll have a sense of what those requirements are and the ways in which the current district lines violate those requirements and recommendations. And one other thing, someone in the public session made a comment about where the line along First Avenue and York Avenue lies. In fact, there is a running north-south from 73rd to 79th Street. The line is at York Avenue, the western side of York Avenue, which, and then which means that Eleanor Roosevelt High School is in fact, excuse me, in the portion of Council District 5 that is to be moved. And the line shifts over to First Avenue at 73rd Street, and then goes all the way down to the bottom of the district. So anyway, with that, I guess we should.
Well, I want to thank Will. If you noticed at the end on the resolve on the resolution, there is a proposal how to correct this, and I have to thank Will for coming up with that and proposing a map, because I think it's important to tell them how they can correct this. And I also have to give a big thank to Chris Collins, who actually was a former chair of Community Board 8. But he also was land use counsel for the city council land use committee. And he was on the call and he contributed a lot of the language and was in the resolution. And I just needed to acknowledge his assistance with that. So with this, I'll turn it back to Russell, I guess.
Let me just, yeah, well, I just wanted to make a quick process point here, which is to the point that you made about, this being sort of a draft, the preamble that goes before the whereas clauses. That's part of the resolution. So just everybody should understand that. And that's, why it is we're going to be able to sort of do it the way we're doing it. So, but yeah, I think with that, why don't you guys call on the folks with the hands raised and we'll take it from there.
Oh, us? Oh, well, that's,
you have
that's
Judy
I can do it.
Anthony's specialty. And take it, why don't you?
Okay, that's fine. Judy first, Judy Schneider.
Hi, I'm Judy Schneider. I'm Vice President of the East 60s Neighborhood Association and co-chair of Parks. I'll make this very brief. I'll talk on two issues. First, this plan before us will break up our neighborhood association. The transportation, sanitation, parks, DEP, just to name a few agencies, have totally different issues in District 26 than they have in District 5. Our membership, composed of individuals, businesses, institutions, and apartment buildings, have come to depend on our local council member and their district office. Will this council member from District 26 have offices in Manhattan and on Roosevelt Island? I think that's a big question. Secondly, parks. Our community board ranks 47 out of 51 for the least amount of park space, and that was in Julie Menon's newsletter today or yesterday, in the city. By carrying out this plan, we would lose all of 24 Sycamores Park. 3/4 of Honey Locust Park would be in District 26, and 1/4 would remain in District 5. The Esplanade and Andrew Haswell Green Phase 1 and 2B, which is not complete at this time. Phase 3 has not yet started. It will probably take $25 million or so to build this phase of the park. Will a council member in District 26 spend that kind of money for 26% of their voters on Roosevelt Island and District 5? Or will most of the members' funds be spent in Queens? Those are my two questions. Thank you. And also, I must thank Sharon and Anthony and Will for doing an absolutely excellent job last night. It was a difficult meeting and you conducted it well, and the minutes are just terrific. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next we have Rita.
I wrote to you this morning. I think that you, Sherry, Russell and Will did an incredible job. We understand that these are preliminary, that they are will be fleshed out as we go along. I would like to make a motion to accept the minutes as submitted.
We don't need to move to that. They're on the floor. As the resolution reported is considered to be on the floor already.
Okay, then I don't want to call the question too early, and
No, I think you should wait a little bit. Yeah, there's people who aren't their last night.
but I think you guys did an incredible job. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Okay, we have Ed Hartzog.
Hi, thanks, Anthony. Thanks, Sherry. Yeah, I'm just going to repeat a little bit what I said last night, and pardon me for being Captain Obvious. But again, what other people have said, I think with respect to this community district and people in District 5 and maybe District 4, if we're going to be down testifying in front of the commission at the future hearings on this matter, that we should frame, or at least attempt to frame, our arguments in a very positive way, not attempting to pit one borough against another. It's just one person's humble opinion in terms of messaging. And thank Will for proposing a solution. I think that goes a long way with respect to this redistricting process. I don't think we need to go into chapter and verse as to what can happen when the lines are then redone. We've seen what happens in that situation. And I would just caution that, while we have this excitement now, I will remind us of some painful episodes over the years on this community district, hopefully to correct the past, i.e., big projects that we've opposed that have not necessarily gone our way. Thinking of the Marine Transfer Station, I'm thinking of the Blood Center, I'm thinking of other projects. This is going to be a long, long slog. There'll be many amendments to this, I think. Hopefully there will be, and we need to continue with our enthusiasm throughout this process and not allow the length of it to flag our continued efforts to express our opinion and our options. And that's it. So thank you all.
Thank you, Ed. Lynn Strong-Shinozaki.
Hi, thank you. I totally agree with everything that people have been saying so far, and particularly some of the comments that Ed just made. What didn't come up last night that I really wanted to put in front of people is how challenging and complicated this mapping creates for any of the constituents that live in our districts. And what I mean specifically by that is that Community Board 8 would effectively be represented by 3 council members, one of whom I question whether they're going to be showing up to our meetings in Manhattan. And the other concern that I have is that with our elected officials already, we are split in terms of how we're being represented. How complicated are they going to try to make all of this for any of us to try to get things done with our elected officials? This overly complicates the Upper East Side being able to, and Roosevelt Island being able to do anything. And that's a part of something that I think needs to be noted in terms of our discussions as far as why we disagree. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Rebecca Dangor.
Can you call a few other people before me? I was going to make a motion.
Oh, all right. Craig, later.
Hi, everyone. I want to thank all of you for being able to put this together so quickly. Know how hard that is with little time to be able to do it. So I really appreciate that. And like everyone else, I'm baffled by how these lines were drawn and how this concept was drawn up. I just have one comment and then one question. So I think generally the resolution is very good. I do think we may want to consider some tweaks to some of the clauses, as at least in my reading it, and I've only been able to look at it in the past hour or so. In some cases, I think it comes across in the way we're framing it as our community district, not necessarily showing a lot of respect towards Queens 26. And we should be careful to emphasize that there are issues that our legacy districts and those elected officials that have been representing us have been invested in, and that we should identify those issues and speak to the amount of work that these elected officials have done and the loss of all the institutional knowledge and partnerships that have been created over the years and the coordination that would occur if these lines were to be drawn and we were to be divided. I just don't want it to come across as we don't share the same values or goals or positions as some of our neighbors in Queens, because we don't know enough to recognize whether that is actually the case or not. I think there's a much stronger argument to be made in terms of how this would adversely impact in other ways. And then the question that I had is, I really appreciate the work that was done to try to come up with redrawn lines. But in thinking about this, will this work because we've addressed the Manhattan issue, but by taking out the piece that is proposed for the Queens 26 district, it then creates inequities on the Queens side, if I'm not mistaken, because now they're going to be short the residents that were proposed to be part of Manhattan, and that would create a domino effect. So I just want to make sure that we don't put anything in the resolution that, with all good intentions in trying to solve the issue, that we've thought it through to the extent that we're not going to be discounted because we're creating a different problem on the Queens side.
Maybe Will wants to address how he approached this. Will, why don't you?
Yeah. So I did balance the districts in both Manhattan and the Bronx. And so in theory, the two self-contained districts would be balanced within, the margin of error. I will stress that all that margin for error is actually only capable of being done if the districting commission doesn't overvalue the one person, one vote for Staten Island. Staten Island right now is so far below the regular threshold. It's like 7,400 below the threshold of what is the preferred number of residents. And so if they don't address Staten Island being so disproportionately overrepresented, it isn't possible. But
that's beyond the 5%.
So the 5% is between the
just
smallest district and the biggest district. So if you look at the way that they've actually done the districts, the biggest district is only going to be up to like 1,250, somewhere in that range, over the preferred, number. So the population of New York City divided by 51, that number is the preferred number. The highest district is only going just slightly over that number because the Staten Island districts are so far below that preferred district number. That 5% starts really low, and the top end of that 5% is just a hair above the preferred number. Does that make sense? Some people give me a thumbs up if that was logical.
It does, and I guess my question
Absolutely.
is, we want to allude to this to some degree in the resolution to talk about the broader citywide issues that may be necessitating these proposed lines that don't make sense for us.
And I'll also admit that I did this during the workday and realized I have so much other things I needed to do during my workday that I would be a disservice to the rest of everything else going on. That as fun as it is to redesign the council districts to what I thought was appropriate, that was not a great use of my resources. And so I did stop after leveling Manhattan and the Bronx, and just knowing that we could do that between those two districts just knowing that it's feasible.
Yeah, so you did a very admirable job given the constraints you faced. Again, I just want to make sure that we don't put something out there that will then just be discarded because they're going to say, oh, well, what happened
It's
elsewhere?
definitely possible.
And just making sure we address that somehow in the resolution, or make that, try to find a way to modify it as we try to, as we come up with the final language based on all the comments from tonight.
Yeah, and I'll also say that next to Gail Brewer, I may be the person who cares the most about Manhattan and not about other boroughs. So my limited knowledge of like neighborhoods in Queens and neighborhoods in like far out Brooklyn, I don't want to profess that I am at all close to an expert on how those lines should actually be drawn. And so that's
We're
why
confident that it can be done.
But it's all feasible.
Yes.
Oh,
It's definitely doable. Yeah, exactly. That's the point. Yeah, I mean, that's the key thing for our purposes.
Okay, thank you, Craig.
All right, thank you.
We next have Rami Siegel.
Hi, I was speaking on my meeting.
I'm calling the question.
Oh, I think we should.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I would hope, I mean, we have people
Look,
who haven't spoken on. I think we should. at
I mean,
least
I will just observe, no one yet has spoken against the resolution. And so I think I appreciate people wanting to speak on this. And I appreciate the comments that have been made, but obviously we did have a lot of comments last night. And, strictly speaking, once there's a calling of the question, we're supposed to move to that. So, if you guys want to do one or two more, maybe we'll do that. But I think we should just try to move on.
Well, there's two hands remaining, so I'm fine with holding off until they speak.
Okay, we have Alita, Sharon Pope Marshall. Rebecca had deferred her comment until
She was also calling the question.
finished.
So I think,
She
why don't we
was? Okay.
consider, yeah, so I think we can consider it called after Sharon, if you guys want to do that.
Okay, great. Alita,
Thanks,
please.
Anthony, and thank you. I'll echo for Shari and Anthony and Will. You did a yeoman's job last night. Thank you. I just wanted to address ULURP and why this proposal is so dreadful for ULURP in the area. ULURP, for those who are unfamiliar, is the Uniform Land Use Review process, and in it, the community board has a voice in whether a zoning change, a proposed zoning change, is accepted or not, or approved by the city planning people. So the city council member is essential in that process, as we all saw in the blood center. Not that that prevailed, but that's another story. This council member has to understand what the community thinks, and I believe be responsible to the community. If the hospitals are peeled off and put into Queens council member district, that council member won't understand or won't be as concerned with what he will or she will understand, but may not be as concerned with what the rest of the surrounding Upper East Side neighborhood has to think, because that council member, really with only 27% of their constituents here, will be answerable primarily to Queens. And so we have a situation where any entity, and in particular, I'm thinking of the hospitals, want to expand or change zoning, they will not, they will be able to do it without the community input that would be necessary if they were all part of the same city council district, I believe. And Anthony, or correct me if I'm wrong, Shari, correct me if I'm wrong, your voting rights, Elizabeth or Sharon, correct me if I'm wrong. And so that's why it's so important. We need a city council member who understands what the community expects, what we believe in, what our values are. And it may be different, it may be the same, but it may be different from Queens. And to lose the hospitals as part of the council member district is would be really unfortunate for ULURP process for those particular blocks. So I wanted to say that. I hope I explained it in a articulate or comprehensible fashion for those who don't understand. And I'm always happy, as I'm sure many, many other people are, to talk about it, but it's really essential for land use that they remain part of this community. So thank you very much for the time.
Just one comment before we go to you, Sharon. The Council District 26, which is the Queens district that Community Board 8 is losing people and area to, is already divided between two community boards in Queens. And so that that particular city council person will be responsible for not 2, not 3, but 4 community boards. And it's hard to imagine, even with all the intention, all the good intentions and gigantic staff that city council members have, that they will be able to give each community district the attention that it needs and deserves.
Interesting
Sharon.
point. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Sharon, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I just want to follow up on Staten Island, just put a little bit of meat on the bones. Staten Island, there was a plan, a proposal that was floated some years ago to connect the council districts between Staten Island and Brooklyn. And there was such an uproar of coming from Staten Islanders that plan was never implemented. And as a result, Staten Island has 3 community districts when in fact, and this is something that Will was alluding to earlier, when in fact community board, or I'm sorry, community districts, community boards, when in fact they should have really 2 or 1.5. What I'm trying to express is that in following up Will's comments is that it is absolutely doable. You have this imperfection on Staten Island that is certainly outside of the margin of error. And so that we know already that it is possible to have a council district that has less than the number of individuals that they should have. And I also want to thank Russell, Anthony, Shari, and Will. You just really handled a complicated issue and made it really easy for everyone to understand. So it was a yeoman's job. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharon. So I think because the question has been called, you
can see if there's opposition to calling the question and just take a show of hands on that.
Is anybody opposed to not calling the question? Please raise your hand.
No hands.
All right, so
So the secretaries, yeah.
take a vote.
Just a friendly reminder, if you have to leave the meeting early, please make sure to let Will know so we don't accidentally count you as a yes vote. That being said, if you'd like to vote no, abstain, or not vote for cause, please raise your hand.
Looks
Can
like
we try and unmute Mohit just to make sure he's still gone? Oh. Valerie?
Hi, I just came on, so I don't know what we're voting on, so I'm going to abstain.
Oh, and you weren't at the meeting either. Yeah, we're voting on the resolution opposing the redistricting.
Oh, okay. Well, then I can vote on that.
So you're voting, how are you voting?
I'm voting
Yes.
against the redistricting.
You're voting yes on the resolution, okay.
Thank you, Sharon.
Okay. Hey, Russell, just before we finish this up, I would just like, since we have indicated we would take amendments or revisions to this resolution, if anybody has them, could you send them to Will? If you have anything else you think should be included, or if you think there's something that should be revised, we would love your input. And also, we will announce when the public hearings are in August, and we encourage, I guess it'll be Russell who'll be speaking on behalf of the community board, but as individuals, we really have to get out there and get before these commissioners and, and testify. We've seen, Dan Kaminsky, who's been advising us, said that's what happened in Staten Island. I mean, Staten Island was not entitled for 3 districts, but they came out in such force to speak before the commissioners that they were able to keep their 3 council districts. So we really have to do that. And we're counting on the block associations and any other group to organize their members and just get out there and testify as to why you think this should be reversed. Thank you all. Thanks, Russell.
Thank you. All right, let's move now to go ahead.
Sorry, it's just, I want to confirm no hit one more time because I see he's here. If he was present during the vote, can we just unmute him to make sure, and then I can read the count?
I literally just got back, so I was not present.
Okay, so then it passed 42 to 0.
Good. All right. Let's go to the Transportation Committee and Chuck and Craig.
Chuck, you just need to unmute. We couldn't hear anything you said.
Sorry, we have 3 resolutions, as you can see, and the first one was 890 Park Avenue, and that's a revocable consent at 890 Park. And what they have is they have a proposed stoop, 3-step. They had, it was 3 steps leading up to the building entrance, which previously was leading down, and they reversed that. And then they also have where there were some things that were laid out in the front. They have a fence and some plantings that are alongside the entrance that go the length of the building. And the encroachments are, it's 15 feet to the street, and they encroach about 5 feet. And the buildings on either side have the same encroachment, so it's consistent with the buildings. And now there was discussion about this, and this was something that came up before the Landmarks Commission a while ago. What happened was this came before our community board, and our community board Landmarks Committee disapproved the proposal, but primarily because of things on the roof and that were too visible and all kinds of other things having nothing to do with the issues that we're talking about here. It went to the Landmarks Preservation Commission, and after a lot of back and forth, they modified the proposal, and it was approved by the Landmarks Commission in 2017, and it never really proceeded until just recently. And so the only thing that was left for them to do was to get this revocable consent. And I know that Lo Vandervolk spoke in the public session against it, but what they did was the Landmarks Preservation Commission did approve them changing the stairway the way they wanted to change it. So and it was just a question of having to get the revocable consent for the entranceway, and then for things that were next to the entrance. And that's all we were really considering in our committee. And we had a fair amount of discussion about it, and others may want to comment on it. The people.
Before you go to comments, just 2 quick clarifications. One,
go ahead.
I think in this case, it will not line up with neighboring buildings. I think that was the other proposal, in which case we said that the proposal would. In this one, I don't think there was anything in the minutes alluding to the encroachment being similar to neighboring buildings.
Oh,
And I just,
okay.
I'll double check that right now, but I thought I had looked at that before. And then second, I just want to make clear also
All right.
that the proposed fenced-in area will be either covering or replacing an area where there are currently metal grates, which are basically not able to be walked over anyway. So they did indicate that the
Yeah.
intent of putting in that area was essentially because they were covering an area that really isn't usable sidewalk space currently.
Yeah, thank you. Great. Appreciate that. Why don't we go, we have some board members that want to comment on it, and I see Alita Camp first. Can we unmute Alita?
Thank you. I oppose these kinds of revocable consents because it is a taking of public space for private use, which is the opposite of what's supposed to happen, at least through eminent domain. It always feels as though there's a desire to create a moat and a distance between the people walking by on the street and the people who live in that particular single family residence. Streets are heavily used, and even though there is no commercial traffic in the sense of no restaurants, minimal stores on Park Avenue, it still is a trafficked area. It's crowded. I walk on Park Avenue as I do on other avenues a lot, and I see people with their dogs, strollers, wheelchairs, walkers, kids on scooters, kids on bikes, the usual stuff that we see because we live in a very dense community. And it just feels really wrong to give a public sidewalk to a private use, even if the grades are not walkable. Maybe they ought to be walkable on. It just doesn't feel as if we should be giving public space to a private use. So that's just my general feeling, and it certainly exists in this particular instance. Not always, but in this instance it does. Thanks very much, Chuck.
Thank you. Just one thing to point out, this resolution was approved, 9 in favor, including a public member and 1 opposed, and Michelle Birnbaum is next. So Michelle voted no. And
yeah, I voted no, both for the reasons that Alita alluded to, but also the fact that this had come before us in 2015. The architect, who was not terribly forthcoming, he was very difficult to pin down on certain questions, but he did acknowledge that there were changes made to this application. So it's not exactly that the same exact application came to us in 2015, but when it did, we disapproved it. The claim is that because this specific entrance was not mentioned in that resolution in a whereas clause, the assumption was made that that part of the presentation was in fact accepted. We have absolutely no idea whether or not that was the case. And because this was 7 years ago and the front of this building is now going to undergo tremendous renovation, I wish we had a visual of it, but the entire front door and front steps, the front door is being raised. Obviously, you have to cut in to the facade in order to raise that door, but the architect was not clear on that, wouldn't sort of offer information on that. We have no idea as to the materials that are going to be used. We don't know what the front door will be made out of. We don't know about the lighting. We don't know about what the gate will consist of. Now, the transportation committee will say, well, that's really not our concern because we're talking about revocable trust. However, it is the concern of the board, and it is the concern of other committees, such as the Landmarks Committee. All told, it was a particularly egregious presentation to me, both with the presentation in itself and with what was being created and requested. And I would suggest that this board turn this down. Thank you.
Can I'd just like to make a correction, Michelle, to what you said. This stoop was mentioned in the resolution as being one of the features, and but it was not mentioned in why it was being disapproved. And that was the one thing. And secondly, what happened here is that the Landmarks Preservation Commission did approve this whole configuration of the stoop. So it has been approved by Landmarks. And I think our committee felt that since this was just the last step in this process, the revocable consent, that it didn't make sense to go back and make them either go through the whole process of going back to the Landmarks committee or any other committee because they had already got the approval of the Landmarks Commission. But let's continue. Let's Jane Parshall, who's obviously one of the co-chairs of the Landmarks. Our Landmarks.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Russell. I looked at the resolution today and it's true. None of the whereases mention the stoop. That being said, I am going to support the Carnegie Hill Neighbors position that we should not be encroaching onto the sidewalk. It's a public space. So I just wanted to be clear about that, Chuck.
Sure.
There's been a lot of back and forth and I feel I've been a little Johnny come lately to the table on this and I apologize for that. But I don't think at this moment in time, we should grant the revocable consent. Thank you.
Thank you. Sherry Weiner, I believe, is next.
I have to follow up on what Craig had said. I live down the street from this property and I went by it. And it certainly will not, it's Park Avenue. It's all high-rise buildings. There's no townhouses here. And I was concerned when I read the documentation about where they were putting a garden. And that was even before I heard about the grates that are there. So I think it's just completely inconsistent with what's doing on Park Avenue on that in that location. And I'm going to vote against the resolution. Thank you,
Sherry. Anthony Cohn, next. Anthony?
Thank you, Chuck. I have a question. As it is right now, the steps that go down to the subterranean front door obviously project somewhat into the sidewalk. The stoop will obviously also project onto what's now the sidewalk. Yeah. Is it the same distance? Is it less? Is it more?
Craig, it's a little bit.
In other words, is the encroachment greater than the current encroachment with the?
Yes, Anthony. I think it is. I'm not sure. Was it 2 or 3 feet, something like that? Craig, do you remember?
Yeah, I'm looking right now. If you just give me a minute, I'll try to pull that up.
Sure.
We may want to just move on to those comments and I'll come back to that.
Yeah, it was just a question to help clarify my
Sure.
Thank you.
We'll get that answer for you. Elizabeth Rose is next, I believe.
Thank you, Chad. It seems, reading the minutes from your meeting, it sounds like there was a deliberate planning decision that removed stoops along Park Avenue to create a consistent sidewalk along Park Avenue. And I think that should be the primary guide here, that we want to maintain the consistency of the sidewalk space on Park Avenue. So I will be voting against this.
Thank you. Rita Popper.
I'd like to call the question.
Is there a second to that?
Jane.
Jane. Okay. All in favor of calling the question, or anyone against calling the question, I should say? Doesn't look like it. So can the
We're going to lower all the hands.
Can the secretaries call the roll?
Yes. If you're voting no, abstaining, or not voting for cause, please raise your hand. Sarah?
I'm voting no on the revocable consent.
That's no on the resolution.
Thank you. Barbara?
No.
Abraham?
No.
Sherry?
No.
Michelle? Oh, did I skip Marco? Sorry. Marco?
No.
And before we continue, can I just provide the answer to Anthony's question in case that does impact anyone's thinking? The current encroachment of the steps leading down is 2 feet 4 inches. So this would be a 5-foot encroachment in total. So the difference would be 2 feet 8 inches further beyond what exists now.
Thank you. Michelle?
No,
Lynn?
Nope.
Sahar?
No.
Alita?
No.
Valerie?
No.
Elizabeth Rose?
No,
Gail?
No.
Anthony?
No.
Sharon?
No.
Jane?
No.
Ed?
No.
Elizabeth?
No. No.
Thank you. Boz?
No.
John?
No.
Sandrea?
No.
Myself is a no.
And I'm going to vote no also. I've changed my vote from at committee level.
Anyone else? Give me 1 second. Let me just get a total for you. Resolution passes. Oh, actually, wait, hold on. Resolution fails.
It's the
Resolution fails. That's my fault. Lori, is that a vote?
Yes, I want to change my vote to no.
Abraham?
No, if the voting was done, I was going to make a substitute resolution to disapprove.
Is there a
Marco
second?
seconds. Marco seconds.
Thank you.
The voting's done. Preliminary total is 24 noes to 20 yeses. But let me get you an official total.
I don't think we need more discussion on this necessarily. So if
No.
somebody wants to call the question,
No.
we can move to that. Michelle's
Is there a
raising her
second?
hand.
Call the
Jane's doing a
question.
second.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. With any objection to calling the question? Okay. So we should have one of the secretaries call the roll.
This is me again.
Andrea's
Or
turn.
Andrea? You want? I'd prefer if you took it, actually. If not, I'll take it.
I'm open, it's fine. Greetings all. Please raise your hand if you are voting no, abstaining, or not voting for cause. Valerie Mason.
She put her hand down.
Okay. Russell,
No.
Chuck,
No.
David,
David, you just need to unmute.
No.
Thank you.
Addison,
No.
No.
Mohit,
No.
Rebecca,
No.
Rita Papa,
No.
Tina,
No.
Sharon,
Confused. What are we voting on? I'm sorry. What did we vote on a minute ago? And now what is this?
So the other one was a motion to approve the revocable consent that failed. And so now this is a
Yeah.
motion to disapprove the revocable consent. So this is
So if I
Um,
don't want it, I vote yes.
correct. Yes means no.
Oh, okay, yes. So, okay, so I'm voting yes. So I'm sorry. I just didn't follow that. Sorry.
oh yeah, a yes for you, right?
Mine will be a
Yes.
Yes, yes. Vanessa,
No.
John,
Oh,
Greg,
Greg, we didn't hear you, so just unmute again.
No.
Thank you.
Margaret,
No.
Elise,
No.
Adam,
No.
and Sandra will be a no. Any more? Any more hands? Give me a few seconds for a total.
I think we can move to the next item
Yeah.
while we tally this up, because one way or another, we've had 2 votes.
Yep. Why don't we, Craig, why don't you do the next revocable consent?
Sure. The next one is for 26 East 78th Street. The application was to construct, maintain, and use a fenced-in area, including steps and an accessible wheelchair lift. So this is currently a residential building that is being converted into a commercial gallery space. So they need to convert it into an ADA accessible entrance. And by doing so, they're requesting this revocable consent. And in this case, unlike the other, it would, the encroachment would line up with neighboring properties.
This was unanimous.
And this was unanimous.
You got some hands.
Marco?
Alita.
Oh, Alita, sorry. I didn't see Alita.
Thank you. I'll be very quick. This is one of those situations where I will support the revocable consent because this is taking a public space for public good, and it's very important to make places ADA accessible. So I fully support this. Thank you.
Marco. Can we unmute Marco next?
Thank you. I was planning to call the question because the committee unanimous approve and they review the project. If you don't mind, I don't know. I'm sorry for the other fellow community members.
Sure. Is there a second to calling? Is there a second to calling the question?
Yes, Jane.
Okay, Jane seconds. Okay. So does anyone object to calling the question? Okay. Secretaries, call the roll.
If you'd like to vote no, abstain, or not vote for cause, please raise your hand. Give everyone one more second. Seeing none, the item passes unanimously with a total of 44 yes, 0 no's, and 0 abstentions.
Craig has the right touch. So the last item that we have is item number 4. This is at the East 82nd cul-de-sac east of East End Avenue. And this was a request for a change of parking regulations from no parking to no standing. And Craig and I went out and looked at all of the cul-de-sacs starting at 84th Street and going down. And in general, while there's a lot of alternate side of the street parking, as you get closer to the end of the cul-de-sac, then it gets a little trickier. Some places in front of the buildings have no standing. Some places have no standing anytime. Other places have no parking anytime. And it's a bit inconsistent. And the folks on 82nd Street came and they said, listen, they would like to change the parking regulation from no parking to no standing in front of their building. And it's that way on a couple of the other streets, but then sometimes there's no parking anytime. And then people were there who basically said, well, we don't think there's a lot of parking there. And if you have a handicap sticker, you could park in the no parking zone, but not in the no standing zone. And the problem is, as you get in those cul-de-sacs, as you get deep into them, where where there's the shape, sort of a concave shape at the end, there's no real room for emergency vehicles to get in and turn around and maneuver around there. And so the resolution that we passed originally was for a request to convert 2 spaces in front of the building from no parking anytime to no standing anytime. And we said we were going to look at it and see whether or not we would pass that resolution or slightly try to modify it. And I think based on our field trip out there, we thought that it ought to be modified to extend a little further into the end of the cul-de-sacs, because if it only is sort of in front of that building there, then as you get past it, there's a car right there that's blocking the turn around, and where an emergency vehicle would have to make that turn. So we believe it ought to be extended slightly down to the end of the end of the cul-de-sac. Is that about right, Greg? Do you want to?
Right. I thought we actually were talking about, so at the very end of the cul-de-sac, there is a no parking anytime sign that is running parallel to the Esplanade, and that goes around the other side, and there are a couple of car lanes before you start with the alternate side. So basically the entire cul-de-sac on 82nd Street is no parking anytime. And I think we thought it would make sense to provide the 2 spaces that 605 East 82nd Street requested on the north side of the street, and then keep it no standing around the corner too, and on the south side also, up until the point where the no parking alternate side begins. And then we were looking at a future agenda item at our upcoming meeting, perhaps in September, where we would address this issue on the other cul-de-sacs where there are concerns that also at the end where emergency vehicles may not have the ability to easily turn around and to gain access to buildings. So we view this as really a safety concern and a need to try to address it to make sure that emergency vehicles have the ability to access not only any residential buildings over there, but the institutions and the Esplanade itself.
A few hands here. I see Elizabeth Rose.
So has anyone checked with the DOT whether there have been any complaints by operators of emergency vehicles or any of the departments that oversee emergency vehicles about the access in these blocks?
We haven't heard anything in particular. I don't know that there was ever an inquiry. We did hear, the reason this came up initially was the residents of 605 East 82nd expressed those concerns, both vehicles being able to access their building, and I thought they also mentioned the ability for vehicles to get into the cul-de-sac area. So that was what precipitated the entire discussion.
And I'm just saying, I understand the perception. I'm just wondering if there is a fact base.
Well, as you know, complaints don't necessarily correlate to whether a problem exists or not. As a function of city life.
That's why I'm wondering, is this a perception of a problem or is this a problem?
No,
Well, I
think-
guess my response would be that when we were there, we saw instances in which there were vehicles that were parked in these no parking areas where if an emergency vehicle had to come in, it could have been a problem.
Elizabeth, just to be clear, these areas are no parking anytime, but people still park in there. And that's why we want to say no standing anytime, because
Then that's an enforcement issue.
no, okay, well, let me talk to one of my theories that I've had for years. Enforcement in New York City is a very iffy situation, and it's very hard to rely on enforcement. And so I've always felt that as a committee and a board, we ought to take steps to make it, let's say, not just rely on enforcement. So if you have no standing anytime, that gives people a clear signal that they're not allowed to be there, and you're going to find less parking in that. And that's what our committee has tried to do over the years. Obviously, we'd like to see enforcement, but realistically, you can't rely on enforcement, and especially in some of those cul-de-sacs when they may not pay much attention to those things. It's not there; it's a little off the beaten track. So
I'll give you an alternative hypothesis in this particular case, which is I think people like having empty space in front of their buildings. I think, this is a topic that's come up multiple times of buildings asking for no standing in front of their buildings for a variety of reasons.
You're preaching to the converted. For years, I've said we shouldn't do these things in front of buildings, but if we're looking at a situation now where it's no parking anytime. And so what we're saying is there ought to be changed to no standing anytime. That's really what it is. So if you really mean no parking, you should make it no standing, because no parking anytime does not deter people from parking.
And DOT at our meeting admitted as much, that enforcement officers don't really make their way down these dead-end streets, these cul-de-sacs. The enforcement is definitely more limited there. But in terms of perception, if you were to if a study were being conducted of these streets and we were assessing whether vehicles would be able to have the ability to turn around at the end of the streets, it would find almost certainly that you would need to have the sidewalk, the curbsides clear in order to allow vehicles to make K-turns, especially larger vehicles. If, say, a fire truck had to come down there. So that was really the concern that we had when we went over there to assess the situation, rather than it being a question of whether a building may be looking to preserve clear space in front of their entrance. I think in other blocks that may very well be the case. This seemed to be a different case study.
Yeah, because can we go to Peggy Price?
I'd like to call the question.
Okay, is there
Marco seconds.
Marco seconds, okay. All right, question's been called. Is there anybody who objects to calling the question? I guess I see one objection, but I think overwhelmingly, I have the feeling people would like to start to vote. So the secretary, why don't one of the secretaries call the roll?
Thank you, Chuck. If you're voting no, abstaining, or not voting for cause, please raise your hands. Michelle?
I actually have a point of information. I would like to ask this question. That's why I raised my hand, because there's something I'm not understanding here. My recollection was, number one, that somebody was going to go out and look at this, and therefore we didn't actually have a resolution.
No.
And the second thing is that if we do, I may be misremembering, the second thing is if we do have a resolution, that what you and Craig are proposing at this meeting is now an amendment to that resolution. So because you've decided that there should be additional parking, so I'm not sure doesn't that have to be a substitute resolution? And so I'm not sure what we're voting on. And I'm thinking that maybe DOT should be the ones to come down and look at this street and actually make a firm decision as to what is needed for emergency vehicle access. I mean, we're all for that. Nobody is against that. But I'm confused as to what we're voting on because you changed the parameters.
Well, it probably, in a parliamentary sense, we should have had either a substitute or an amended resolution, but wanted to save a little time on this. But the resolution was clearly reported out of the committee as is. So if we want to pass that resolution, we can certainly do that.
And we could always, if need be, if we're going to be coming back to discuss the other cul-de-sacs, we can include the rest of this cul-de-sac.
So I think let's just vote on the resolution. Let's play it.
Yeah.
That was what was reported out of the committee.
Okay, Michelle, so your vote is a yes, I assume?
I don't know. I don't remember voting on it in committee. Do you have my vote there?
It was unanimous.
Michelle,
It was unanimous? Okay.
Yes, you voted.
So now we're back to the original resolution that came out of the committee?
The one's in the minute, the one that's in the minutes.
The one that's in the minute. That's what we're
The
voting.
one that's in the minutes. Okay. Yes, so I'll take my hand down.
Okay.
It is.
Elizabeth?
No.
Thank you. And Barbara, I assume you're a yes? You could just nod your head. Yeah, you're a yes. I'm going to say that's a yes. Resolution passes 44 to 1 to 0 to 0.
Just one more note before we go. We had a long discussion about the First Avenue bus lane, and up to from between 61st and 79th Street. And after we had that discussion, we didn't have a resolution. And then at the end of our meeting, DOT said they wanted a resolution. And if they do, if we're going to confirm that with them, that'll be something we'll bring up in September.
Thank you.
So that's, we're done.
Excellent. All right. So let's, it looks like we've been joined by Borough President Mark Levine. So we will let him give his report if he is ready.
Hello, Mr. Chair, and hello, everybody.
Welcome.
Great to see all of you.
You too.
This is a summer meeting and the hour's late, so I'm going to try and set the record for brevity, but I've been out and about in CB8 tonight. I got to see some of you at the Hunter College Summer Barbecue, and then I got to stop at the Swing concert in Carl Schurz Park. It was a beautiful night and a big crowd, so CB8 is looking good tonight. I wanted to first update you on what's happening with monkeypox in New York City. It's I know it's on many people's minds as the number of cases continues to rise rapidly. Over 700 that have been logged here in New York City. We are logging about a third of the total cases in the United States, just in New York City. And that percentage is important because we're only getting about 10% of the supply of vaccine nationally sent to New York City. And that's part of the reason why there's been such a shortage of vaccine, and it's been so difficult to get an appointment for people who are at risk. There's some welcome news this week. Looks like we're getting a shipment of 26,000 more doses that may actually be here by the end of this week. And that will be a step in the right direction, but still not enough. It's important to point out that monkeypox, anyone can get monkeypox, anyone can spread monkeypox, but that virtually every case in New York City to date, and actually nationally, has been amongst gay and bisexual men. So we are really focusing our resources on that community. But everyone should care because that there is a risk that it could spread more broadly in New York City. And so we're very much staying on top of that. On the COVID front, we are in the midst of another wave, but some of the new tools we have at our disposal, like Paxlovid for treatment, are making this a very different wave than what we've seen as recently in January or February. But hospitalizations are increasing in New York City, and so we do want people to be careful. And I'd like to remind folks that rules are still in place on mass transit that do require masking on buses and subways, on ferries and in ferry terminals, in Ubers and in taxis, on Long Island Railroad and airports. So while you may not be seeing too many people wearing masks in those settings, it is important that everyone do follow the rules so that we can continue to take this virus seriously. Feels like every month I come to you, we have to talk about the open meeting law. And we've gotten a reprieve yet again, thanks to the fact that Governor Hochul has extended the emergency order through to August 13th. And so the status quo is in place until then. But we are continuing to operate under the assumption that following that, we'll move on to this new regime as defined by the law the state legislature passed, which moves us into a hybrid world. And you've heard me speak about this in the past. It has some challenges for boards, and we're continuing to seek legal guidance to ensure that we can answer all your questions on how to implement the hybrid rules. We have been able to confirm that you are allowed to require masking at board meetings under the new rules, and that you're allowed to book in spaces which screen for vaccination. We're continuing to seek guidance from the city's law department on outstanding questions. And we want to support you with the resources that you need to make hybrid meetings work. It's actually not easy. Requires technology and know-how and staffing. And we want our office, the Manhattan Borough President's office, to be a resource for you on that front. And we're going to be ready whatever happens come August 13th. So finally, I'll just mention that tomorrow I am joining the mayor. We have a visit from the Democratic National Committee. We have submitted a bid to host for the 2024 convention. I think this would be an outstanding economic development opportunity for Manhattan and New York City. Great to profile our progress and coming out of the pandemic. And I say this too in a governmental capacity. This is an entirely non-political role that I'm playing here because I think that it would be good for New York City. In fact, we've even had Republican elected officials who have joined in the bid process. Tomorrow we're hosting the leadership. We'll be showing them some of the venues. I'll be joining them at Javits Center. We'll keep you posted on that. My opinion is that it would be a big win economically and otherwise for the city to host. So I think I'm going to pause there. If there's time and it's appropriate for questions, Mr. Chair, happy to take any, but I also understand the hour's late and it's a summer meeting. So also totally fine if you want to move on. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, we don't do questions. So, but thank you very, very much for being here. All right. So we will move on to the next committee report. So that is going to be the Rules Committee, Rules and Bylaws. So we'll turn it over to Chuck and Taina and Rebecca.
Okay, thank you, Russell. We had our meeting earlier this month, really drawing on what the board had passed in June. And the board really at that point had said that we ought to have an elections committee as opposed to our nominating committee. And that the elections committee will preside over elections, but will not report a slate out. And at our last meeting where we had 14 members and very good participation and very helpful, we tried to put a little more flesh on the bones that we passed in June. And we have a resolution here amending the bylaws we're replacing section 2D 1-2 with the following. And I don't know if everyone's had a chance to look at them. It came a little late in the game. Valerie's wagging her finger here.
Before we call on Valerie, I'll add my thing, which is what we voted on was in fact different from what the resolution was that was voted on by the full board. We deferred to Chuck's parliamentary procedural knowledge, and he said it was okay that this came forward. That being said, I was the sole no vote, and I will speak to that after we let other members of the board speak.
Let me just go through what we have done here. It won't take that long because it's not that long. And so it provides for an elections committee consisting of 5 members elected by the boards at the September meeting. And then before the end of the meeting, one of the members would be, first, and no member may serve on the elections committee if they're running for office, or if they've been on it they can't serve for 2 consecutive elections. So you can't, if you've been on it once, you can't serve it the next year, but you could the following year. And then before the election of members of the elections committee, each member of the board shall receive information about board members' length of service and any committee positions, including prior service on the nominating or elections committee. Obviously, this is for going forward. Before the end of the September meeting, the chosen elections committee shall select one of the 5 chosen elections committee members as chair of the committee. Then by the end of a 2-week period after the September board meeting, candidates shall send a message to the board office and the chair of the elections committee stating an interest to run. Then at the October board meeting, the chair of the elections committee will report the names of all candidates for board office. Well, it should be board offices. And at that point, additional candidates may be nominated from the floor without the requirement of a second. Then prior to the date of the November Land Use Committee, board members may submit questions to the Elections Committee to be asked of candidates for the board offices. The Elections Committee will decide on the questions to put to the candidates for all board offices. It will ensure that the candidates for each office will be asked the same questions pertaining to the particular office. Then at the meeting, which takes place on the date of the November Land Use meeting, the Elections Committee shall put the questions that have been selected by the committee to the candidates for all board offices. And the questions shall be the same for all candidates for each particular office. Then at the November full board meeting, the chair of the Elections Committee shall run the elections and shall allow each candidate for each office to speak for 2 minutes, except that the candidates for chair shall have 3 minutes. And then after all the speeches have been concluded, board members shall vote for the candidates for each office in a separate roll call vote. And that section 2D-3 will now be section 2D-10. So
Did Chuck just freeze?
I just was knocked. I don't know if you can hear me. I just was sort of knocked off. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
So I may not, I'll have to try to resurrect, but maybe I can be heard, but I don't have the screen right now, and I'll have to go through something to get back onto it. But that was really what we decided, and it's just the biggest difference is that from what we had talked about is that we're allowing people to be nominated from the floor. And the original concept was that the committee itself would meet and ask the candidates the questions, and then there wouldn't be nominations from the floor. But the overwhelming consensus, and this sort of goes along with some of the feelings I think of that were expressed in June, the overwhelming consensus though of the group that met in the committee was that we should have this additional meeting in, you know, where in, let's say the second, it would be the second, probably Wednesday in November. And the questions would be asked in public. And therefore, if you could have in October, people nominated from the floor, if that was, if people wanted to do that, because that was sort of an indication of change that everybody thought made sense. And we had a lot of active participation. And I think this is something that the our committee that met felt that it's certainly worth giving it a try, because the overwhelming consensus of the board was that we wanted to have a different situation than the nominating committee, and that we wanted to have as open a process as possible. So that's what I'll say, and you might as well get some people call on some people here.
Yeah, I agree. If we could unmute Valerie, let's just start.
And
hearing
maybe I could get back my picture here.
Okay, I'm sure you can do it.
You got help. Other people can cough us.
Sure.
Hi, Chuck, that's a great explanation. And from a substantive point of view, I don't have any problem with the resolution. However, I think it is out of order, because according to the bylaws, the resolution has to be sent by mail at least 30 days before the meeting in order to have a vote. So I think perhaps the discussion can continue, but by our bylaws, we cannot vote on this tonight.
Well, we could certainly agree to waive that. The only reason.
How can we waive it?
Well, sir, what's the difference? What was changed? What's the difference? There's a difference between what was voted on and what we have in the minutes?
No, it's the bylaws, and I had raised this before. There is a clause that stipulates any amendment to the bylaws must be given in writing to all board members at least 30 days before we vote. I don't think we've voted on, we did not do this for the last amendments that we voted on, I will say that, but it is a clause in our bylaws.
No, I think that's right. I think the problem is we're running up against a deadline here, Valerie, and I think you're absolutely right. You know, and the question is whether or not we could.
Well, I just wouldn't.
Maybe. Well, you know what? Why don't we just do this? Why don't we discuss this? And we're not having a meeting in September, and why don't we? If we can get a sense that everyone supports this concept, we can send it out to everyone, and we can then vote on it right in the, I don't know if we're going to have a land use meeting or what kind of meeting we're going to have, but we could vote on it at the beginning of the meeting before we have, and then we could implement it.
I think that's really what I was trying to get at, because I mean, I'm not against the substance of it.
No, I understand. No.
Maybe we also want to amend the bylaws for how we can amend them with notice. If an email notice would be effective too. I mean, in case we have to do this again, I don't know. I'm just putting it out there, because I think bylaws can reflect electronic notices as well as. So that might be something we want to put in there too. But sure. And I know this is a lot of form over substance for the non-lawyers in the group, but I would hate to have all the good work that the bylaws committee did undone because we didn't follow the form over the substance. So
I agree. So why don't we discuss this? And if people support it, what we'll do, we won't have any kind of a final vote on it, but we can send it out after this meeting and then vote on it as early as possible in September, depending on whether we have I don't know if we'll have a land use meeting in September or not, but maybe even at that land use meeting, then by the time the process has to start, where we have to select the elections.
We have to Yeah, I mean, look, we have to do this. We have to have a process in place before the September full board meeting.
Correct.
And so if we were going to do this sort of new whatever, it seems to me that the issue is, you would potentially have to have a September land use meeting that we wouldn't otherwise necessarily have to have because we now are going to have to vote on this thing. So
Yeah.
maybe that's, that may not be the case, or it may, but it seems to me, I mean, there's a lot of references in the bylaws to mailing things out, and we just don't do any of that anymore as a practical matter. And a lot of that just reflects the fact that, with few exceptions of people who need things by mail. And so, I think given that, the sort of precedent that we've had where we already have passed amendments to the bylaws earlier this year and didn't mail it out to everybody. And in light of the fact that we've got, the open meetings law suspended where, a lot of things are happening remotely that ordinarily wouldn't be done remotely. I would say we're better off just voting on this today. And, I think that's just a better way to do it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that given that the open meetings law, the state of emergency is still in effect, I think, and we have had so many meetings about this, and everyone.
I just don't want to bring everybody back in September for this specifically, if that's what it comes to.
It feels completely unnecessary. So I think if we could call.
I think before, we do have to acknowledge that if our bylaws do state that and someone objects, we kind of have to follow unless we maybe have a vote to waive it for this thing. But if someone's objecting to something that's in the writing in our bylaws, I don't see how we can ignore the rejection.
Yeah. So what's the process to waive it?
Yeah, because I thought, like, why wouldn't the email be acceptable given like the way we're operating?
It's just 30 days. 30 days. You need 30 days to review.
Yeah, that's the 30 days. But well, what we
look. I mean,
Russell, let me suggest this. Why don't we vote on it tonight, and then we'll.
Sorry, Chuck. Can't people in the meeting waive notice?
Well, that's the question. I'm not sure. I
mean, theoretically, if you could do that, then you would never need notice.
Right. It's a provision in the bylaws. I don't think you can really waive it. But why
don't you, Chuck? You're right. Why don't we vote on it tonight? And if we decide that we also need to vote on it again, or if that, let's not hold up so we'll still have the option of having the September land use meeting. We can do that.
Correct. If we have to vote on it again, we can vote on it. I think that's my thought. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, can we call on Valerie? Were you not done? I see you waving.
Thanks. I appreciate that. I think what you have to have tonight is a non-binding vote. You cannot have a vote. It would still be out of order. You could have a non-binding vote tonight. And I think if we all know what we're going to be doing, I don't think it stops the elections process from going forward because we're really all in agreement, but just to be in complete.
I think what Chuck is saying, what Chuck is saying is we'll have a vote tonight, and the question of whether it's binding or not will sort of, is to be determined.
An indicative vote, and then if it's 50,
I don't want us to get held up on the nature of the vote, but the idea is we're going to vote tonight on this.
I think you need to get hung up on the nature of the vote.
Well, this is the whole point of what Chuck is saying is basically if we vote tonight, we can still also do the vote at the September land use meeting. If we determine that that's what's necessary.
And we'll send it out. We'll send it out right away.
I agree. I agree with that process. I agree. Okay.
Okay.
Can we unmute Craig?
So I would like to make, whether this qualifies as a friendly amendment or a substitute amendment, I don't know, but I was going to suggest that we modify it to say, therefore, the bylaws of Community Board 8 are conditionally amended rather than hereby amended. And then we add something at the end where we say that this resolution will, and these proposed amendments to the bylaws will be sent out where everyone will be able to have 30 days notice, something to that extent. and then we handle it because we'll just be able to take a quick vote in September. And even if we had it at our full board meeting in September, if we had this as our first vote and we essentially went with a conditional vote and then voted again, ostensibly we'd come to the same outcome. And at that point, the resolution is approved and we can then move forward with the elections committee as we intended to do. I don't understand, and Claire, correct me if I'm wrong, why we would need to hold that vote earlier. It just would need to, when we vote and approve it in September, it would therefore be approved and we can move forward. Am I correct? And
Yeah.
does that make sense?
I don't want to go into the full board meeting in September without a process in place. So it has to be done before the full board meeting in September.
Look, I think we should let's just vote. We'll send it out. If we have to vote again in September.
We'll deal with it. Yeah, exactly. I agree with that. So we can just do 2 votes. Let's get into the substance of the rules
Okay,
here so we can.
then I have one substantive question, and that regards point 7, and I'm very pleased with how this resolution came out. I think one of the issues that kept really biting us in the past was the fact that the bylaws were very vague in terms of the precise process, and I think this lays it out very clearly in point 7, where we say in the November land use meeting or on that date, the elections committee, quote, shall put the questions that have been selected by the committee to the candidates for all board offices. The questions shall be the same for all candidates for each particular office. I think it should be a little clearer as to what that means, that it's being put forward, and whether, and even if we don't know the exact form it would take, that we should say, ideally, the precise form it would take in terms of how the nominees would respond to that, but that the responses shall be provided at that meeting.
Yeah, I mean, that's the, yeah.
It's just not clear. It's a little,
I
at
understand.
least in
what
my
you-
reading,
Sure.
it's ambiguous that,
Sure.
that it just,
Okay.
questions should be put out there, but we don't say how they will be actually handled.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a minor friendly amendment unless anyone objects to it.
So we've been joined by our Congresswoman. So before we move on to the next person,
Okay.
can we,
Maloney.
Okay, yes, let's turn it over to Representative Maloney.
Well, good night to everybody. Great to see some old friends and to hear the community board taking care of us. Your Congresswoman now has a police record. I was arrested yesterday, and I want to talk a little bit about the reproductive rights that are under attack by the Supreme Court and their recent decision to overturn Roe. And yesterday, we passed the Women's Health Equity Act. We've taken all these actions to try to help the situation. But yesterday, we decided, the Women's Caucus, that we should demonstrate in front of the Supreme Court. So we went out there to protest the Dobbs-Jackson women's health decision. And there were about 100 of us, and the police came and they said, leave, get out of the street or we're going to arrest you. And so everybody started leaving, but some of us stayed and sat down on the street, and they said, leave. If you don't leave, we're going to arrest you. And so I got arrested. So then they took us and booked us, and we made our statement, and we'll probably make more of them. But anyway, I firmly believe there's no democracy if women can't control their own bodies, particularly in terms of their health and reproductive health care. And I think it's important. And here in New York, we're privileged to live in a state where reproductive rights are respected and they're protected. But that's not true across the country. And the Dobbs decision has resulted in devastating consequences where abortion is already restricted or remains unsafe. So the least I can do is put my body on the line for the 33 million women at risk of losing their rights. Half the reproductive age women in the country are going to lose their rights. 16 states have banned abortion and growing. The Republican Party and the right-wing extremists behind this decision, I would say, are not pro-life, but are pro-controlling the bodies of women and girls. And their ultimate goal is to institute a national ban on abortion. They've said that. That's what they want. So we will not let them win, and I will continue to protest, even if it results in more arrests. We will be fighting back. And last week, I held an oversight committee hearing to examine the impact of the Supreme Court Dobbs decision and joined my colleagues in the House to pass the Women's Health Protection Act, enshrining the right to abortion at the federal level, and the Ensuring Women's Right to Reproductive Freedom Act, which stops Republicans from targeting people who travel from across state lines to access abortion care. Tomorrow, we're going to be voting on an access to birth control pill because they're not stopping with abortion. Thomas has said that the next step will be going after access to contraceptives and also gay marriage. We passed a bill in support of gay marriage and same-sex marriage, and we will continue this fight every day. Another issue that is before us in Congress is gun violence. And earlier we passed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which was safely signed into law. That had one of my bills in there that made trafficking in guns, which is a misdemeanor now, a felony. Law enforcement asked for this and also increased the penalties for straw purchasers. And I will also be holding another oversight hearing to address, actually next week, to address the gun violence epidemic facing our country. And we will focus on the firearms industry role in the gun violence crisis. As residents of the Upper East Side, many of you know our community was all struck with a recent tragedy when Asia Johnson, a 20-year-old woman, was shot at point blank range as she pushed her 3-month-old baby. We had a town hall meeting on it. We had a vigil. And in response, I held this meeting to discuss gun violence facing our neighborhoods, our communities at the local level. This last week, I sent letters to the Biden and Adams administrations calling on them to make readily available more monkeypox vaccines from the federal supply that could vaccinate more than 500,000 people. And those stored in Denmark, we are trying to get more vaccines here. People are not able to access them. This is unacceptable. So we are working to get more. And I'm also working with the residents of Roosevelt Island to examine their healthcare needs and find a provider following the retirement of their one doctor who served the island for 35 years. I opened up 2 vaccination permanent healthcare centers in the Queens section of my district. The governor came to the last one, and there's a push and a feeling that we need to make that happen on Roosevelt Island. It's hard for them to get to health services, so I'm working on it. Lastly, I'd like to announce that I've also honored former community board member Elaine Walsh with an extension of remarks written into the congressional record in recognition of her 1/4 century of dedicated leadership and service. And during her tenure, Dr. Walsh was a constant advocate for this community, particularly in regards to environmental concerns and infrastructure. She worked to support policies and programs that increased accessibility to city services for both businesses and individuals, and served as a source of forceful advocacy for our community. I just want to mention that and open up the board if they want to ask any questions. I do want to compliment Ty Barrera for being recognized as 40 under 40 as a promising leader in our community and our city and our country. Congratulations to you, Ty, and thank you for your service on the community board.
Thank you.
Always great to see you, everybody there. And Rami Siegel was also, and Rebecca were also recognized on that list. So we've got a lot of leaders on the board on 40 under 40. So congratulations to the board for identifying this talent. If you have time for questions, I'll answer them. If there's something you want me to be working on, I'll work on it. I work for you.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we can't do questions, but thank you very, very much for that report. And it was good to see you.
Always great to see you. Thank you.
All right.
I'm back, and I can see I'm in tough company here with my co-chairs. But I recognize them before they ever got these.
Oh, Chuck, you're the best.
Uh,
So I I believe Valerie, was Valerie done speaking?
I guess Rebecca is next, right?
So if we could skip over Rebecca as co-chair, I really think you should speak last. Like before, if we could just call on other board members, if you're okay with that, that's what we've done traditionally.
Just please don't call the question.
No, we won't. No, I won't. We'll go back to, and then Ed Hart, of course not. And then Ed Hart, not trying to remove your right to speak. And then Ed Hartzog had his hand up actually right prior to Rami, but when he clicked yes, his hand was moved out of order. So I'm not skipping the order, but if we could unmute Ed and then go back to the order of Rami. Are you okay with that, Rami? Thank you.
Thanks, Rami. Thanks, Taina. I'd like to speak to a couple of things. One, right out of the gate, and I know we've talked about this waiver thing. I'm just going to make it clear. Look, we can waive that. Not to, no pun intended, but waiver of notice can be waived by everybody here. We're at 40 something people in this board. Everybody can waive notice. Anybody knows that who practices law in the state or in the federal courts. Notice can always be waived. So I think that's a non-issue. But let's get to the heart of the matter, as Russell has said. I have said, ad nauseum, that I believe that transparency, openness is, the hallmark of good elections and good democracies, good republics, whether it's on a national, state, or local level when we're voting, and especially here at the board. And look, with all due respect, I know the borough president, if he's still here, we're going to renegotiate our contracts for the big bucks that we get for this. But let's kind of keep it in perspective, folks. We serve as volunteers and we do put in a lot of time, but let's keep it in perspective. And simplicity and simplicity and simplicity. So I think we had a good discussion. The chairs did a nice job facilitating that, and my hat's off to all three. And I think we were abundantly clear in our consensus that the previous system was not working for whatever reason. Who cares? Well, we voted that out. And I think what we had was a good compromise with respect to openness. There's absolutely, in my humble opinion, there's no need for all the alleged confidentiality. That only breeds mistrust, as we've seen on many levels on our elections. And I just think that we need to go back to where we are. And I think we should really vote on it tonight because, again, we talked about this for several meetings. For those who weren't there, sorry you weren't there, but we are running up against a problem. And having a meeting in August, I think those who have been on this board for many years know, like a lot of people in New York, it's very difficult. The Congresswoman is here. She knows, I believe, that turnout is going to be the same with respect to August. And let's just get this behind us so we don't have it lingering and move on. We've talked about it a lot, and those are my thoughts on it. Taina, thank you. Rami, thank you for letting me jump in there. Barbara, I jumped over you as well, so thank you. And I'll stop. And I think you all know where I stand on this. Transparency and simplicity, the watchwords of the day. So thanks very much, folks.
Thanks, Ed. If we could go to Rami, then Barbara, and then if you could lower Ed's hand.
Well, I was planning on calling the question, so
Yes,
I don't know
if we're
where.
going to call it a question, let's skip because we have to go back to Rebecca. So Barbara, if you're going to call it a question, then hold and we'll go to Rebecca. Were you going to call it a question?
No.
No.
Barbara, you need to unmute.
We can't hear you, Barbara.
I always unmute too quickly, so I'm sorry. And then it doesn't work. Two comments. One is, can we also amend to say mailing or emailing? Can we add something to say emailing to update it to 2022? Or actually 1998?
The problem is the 30 days.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so it would be the same thing. It could be 30 days, from now. if we're doing the same
We'll
thing.
change, Barbara, we'll move to change the bylaws, but I think right now we probably can't do.
Okay, the second question I do have, and this is a question. So I don't remember what we said. So we have this set questions, the same questions for chair and second vice chair and so on. Do we give it in writing and they respond in writing?
No.
I forget. Can you explain to me?
Yes, here's what we came up with, which was actually a suggestion that Judy Schneider had that we all thought solved the problem, because everyone said this ought to be public. So what's going to happen is at that first meeting in November, people are going to be asked the questions in front of the whole board, and the answers will be in public in front of the whole board.
And will they know the questions beforehand?
No.
It's the election committee that
No.
determines the
They
questions.
will not know the questions before.
They will not. And it's the election committee that will determine the questions.
Correct. And the elections committee will take suggestions from board members, and they'll look at all the questions and sort them out and decide, which are the most appropriate questions to ask and for each office. And then we'll have, at the meeting, they'll be asked in public, and the answers will be before the whole board.
And I will say, you explained it so well. It was so confusing at the meeting, and I think except for that I got it. So thank you.
Sure.
I got it, and I'm all for it.
Great.
Whichever way, whether it's now, 30 days, whatever, I don't care.
Okay, so now I think we are to Felice, then Jane, and then we will go back to Rebecca. But if you're calling to question, hold, because Rebecca wants to speak.
Thanks. This was a tremendous effort. I just wanted to build on Craig's question or comment with regard to item number 7. Because there are 6 offices and it could take a long time to go through and listen to all those questions, can we suggest that only the elections committee asks questions?
No, that is it. No, it is only the elections committee that asks questions for this.
Okay.
No one else is going to ask, and it's going to be, the setup will be, there'll be the candidates and the elections committee, and the rest of the board will be there to hear the questions and answers.
Okay, great. Because otherwise I was just concerned that it would be especially long. So perfect. Thank you.
Right. Jane, I guess is next.
Yeah.
Oh, and then Sahar one.
Yeah, we have Jane and Sahar.
Chuck, I don't know who's been on the community board for the longest, and I guess it's the death knell for the nominating committee. I just wanted to let everyone know that I adored the 2 terms I served on the nominating committee, and I'm going to vote to support tonight's resolution. But I do feel badly that things have come to this pass. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. I think I've been on the board the longest at this point, but I think we should give this a try. That's my view. Sahar, can we unmute Sahar?
Yeah, hi. First of all, thank you guys for working on this. And I've been to your meetings, so amazing work. My only small addition that if you want to add it to this is like maybe put minutes, like maybe 2 minutes that everybody gets to answer each question. As Felice just mentioned, there are so many committees and there'll be so many people who will be answering. So just to keep everything kind of contained within a time frame, if we can add that too, so that whoever is kind of applying would know that they will be required to answer as you have that time thing, that within 2 minutes, because some people might have longer answers, some might have shorter. So the max that they can go up to is 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes for any question. That I feel like might just contain the time frame as well on that day, because we would like to hear everyone speak. That's just a small thing that I wanted to add.
That's fair.
I guess, my thought on that, and I'd be interested to others, is that, the committee is going to select questions. You're not going to have, 20 questions to each candidate. That would be too much. I mean, and I think there, is a certain, there are probably limited questions that you ask the candidates. And, in the end, even though we have, a number of offices depending on the candidates, I mean, we spend many, many hours at at meetings, and I don't think it would drag on endlessly. And I thought we would sort of leave that to the elections committee, and the elections committee will be trying, I'm sure, to make sure that we don't have something that just goes endlessly on. That's my thought there, Sahar. Oh, I guess Rita wanted to say something before Rebecca. Go ahead, Rita.
Just wanted to say, I think you did a fabulous job. I've been in every meeting except the last one. They were long. I think that you captured what we felt was wrong with the old procedure, and you made it really much more public and inclusive. And I want to thank you. I think you did a great job.
Thank you, Rita. Our esteemed co-chair, Rebecca. Thank
Mm-hmm.
you.
Yeah, so I'll be quick. I just think because I was the one no vote, I should also explain that. The main reasons why were as follows. Number one, I felt it was very different, a very different concept, as I said earlier, than Craig's resolution that he presented before the full board. The second is, I've spent so much time looking at all of these rules and bylaws in response to what I think some people are forgetting have been two very difficult elections. We might be going back to in-person again soon, which means there is no mute button in real life. I am uncomfortable conducting any kind of full board type question session, call it PTSD, of whatever you want to say. The third is I'm very uncomfortable with taking an entire meeting that we are supposed to be dedicating, even if theoretically we might not ever have a land use vote in November, given kind of the political climate. I am just fundamentally opposed to taking up an entire night of time we're supposed to dedicate to the public. I understand elections are very important, but I also think we're very smart people capable of making those decisions on our own. And I'm never going to vote in favor of something that takes away time we're supposed to listen and conduct the public's business, not our internal matters. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I think I guess Rami wanted
Yeah,
to.
I think Rami was trying to call a question, but had lowered his
Call the
hand.
question. Call the question.
Is there a second to that? Yes, Rita seconds that. Anyone against calling the question? Okay, can we have the secretary call the roll?
Rami, can you handle that? Andrea?
This
Andrea?
one me? No, it's me? It's Andrea, right? It's
Okay.
Andrea.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to give the total for the transportation substitute disapproval. It passed 29 to 15 noes. So please raise your hand if you are voting no, abstaining, or not voting for cause. Sharon?
I abstain.
Rebecca?
No.
Michelle?
Abstain.
Marco?
Abstain.
Valerie?
Abstain.
Sharon Lena?
I thought I had voted before.
Okay, your hand.
Yeah, I.
Right. You did, right? So, okay, because your hand is still up. Okay. Ms. Brown?
No.
Waiting to see any more.
Could we just double check that Sharon Pope Marshall is still here by trying to unmute her? Sorry.
Yeah, Sharon Pope Marshall, if you were still here, please unmute. Otherwise, you're going to not be counted in this vote. Okay. I think that's our answer.
Was that?
She
No.
texted
Okay,
that she was possibly leaving after
weren't sure
Carolyn
if it was
got
her
done
number.
speaking.
Okay, with that said, it passes 38 yes, 2 noes, and 4 abstaining. Thank you.
I want to thank my co-chairs, and I want to thank all the people who attended our various meetings on this, and participated with interesting and great discussion. And hopefully we'll see how things operate in our brave new world coming up shortly. So thanks again, everyone.
Yep.
So I just want to pick up on what Ed said about notice being waived, and notice can potentially, I guess, notice can be waived by those to whom notice is owed. But it seems to me that essentially everybody would have to waive notice if we were going to go that route. So I will just, I don't want to put anybody on the spot here, but essentially if and maybe people don't care about being put on the spot, obviously, we've had folks raise this issue, but I would say essentially if you, setting aside the question of sort of complying with the bylaws, if we're looking at it as an issue of notice that can potentially be waived, if you object to the waiver of notice, why don't you send me an email, and that would also just be helpful info. And if folks don't object, then that will sort of inform what we do. I don't want to get too hung up on this. So, Alita, if it's about this, why don't we just talk offline and let's move to the next committee report, which is the Landmarks Committee. And so we'll turn it over to Jane and Anthony, who filled in for David, and we can unmute David as well, just in case.
Thank you, Russell. It was a big help to have Anthony on board this past Monday evening. We had 4 applications. Number 1 and number 4 were not unanimous, but number 2 and number 3, 2 and 3 were unanimous. I actually wrote up those 2 resolutions. So one is for 18 is 68th Street, and the other for the Society Library. They were unanimous. Rita? Anybody want to call a question on them?
So we have Judy and then Rita and then Michelle.
Okay, and we got a second on that?
Oh, no, those are the hands that are up. So I'm just
well,
going
I'm
in
just
order.
worried about number 2 and 3 that were unanimous. Is there going to be a discussion on them?
And was one unanimous also?
No, one
was
is
also,
for-
no, Jane, one was also unanimous.
Oh, I'm sorry, but one was a disapproval, whereas number
Right.
2 and 3
2 and 3 were approvals, yes.
approvals. I thought we could just do those first and get them out of the way.
Okay,
I think that's a
we
good
got some
idea.
hands.
Rita,
Judy's had her hand up first. So
okay, Judy,
That's-
whoever, Judy.
I call the question on the 2 unanimous resolutions
That were approvals. Thank you, Judy.
that
Is there
were
a sec-
approvals.
Second?
We got a lot of seconds.
Okay, great. So.
Is there anyone
I-
opposed to calling a
which of
question on
the
these?
secretaries is gonna take those?
Let's just make sure we have a chance for folks who are opposed to raise their hand. Let's lower all the hands, right? Well, yeah.
Done.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Go ahead, Secretary.
So just to clarify for everybody, we're voting on landmarks items 2 and 3, which are both unanimous approvals, which means a yes is a yes, a no is a no. If you'd like to vote no, abstain, or not vote for cause, please raise your hand. Seeing none, the items pass unanimously.
Thank you, Rebecca. So now we can turn the meeting over to Anthony.
Thank you, Jane. 1014 Fifth Avenue, which is directly across the street from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and house built in 1906, more or less. That was for many years used by the as Goethe House, the sort of German, the cultural arm of the German embassy. And the building has been vacant for a number of years and has been purchased or has been given or some kind of arrangement between Germany and a not-for-profit to renovate the building, expand it, and use it for purposes similar to those that were used before. The public and the committee all spoke in opposition to the plan for a variety of reasons. That it seemed in its very nature to violate the, I think one member of the public described it as violating the ethos of the building, which of course was built as a single family residence. It's, even though it's Upper Fifth Avenue, it is in fact a residential neighborhood. And it was felt both by the committee and by the public that the interventions, certainly the interventions at the ground level on the Fifth Avenue side, were too commercial in nature, and that the large limestone bench that was that actually Lowe alluded to in the public session, that large curving limestone bench not only intrudes on the public way, on the sidewalk, but it also provides an attractive nuisance for people hiding behind it who may or may not have good intentions. And then as regards the rear of the building, they're proposing a fairly substantial addition, about almost 2,500 square feet, that would in fact block the light to some apartments on either side of it, and also it was felt by everyone was out of character, both with the original intention of the building and with the neighborhood as a whole. There are two people who seem to want to speak. There's Rita and then Michelle. Rita.
I'm just calling the question on the motion to disapprove.
Okay.
You got a second from Ron?
Yes. Let me just see if Michelle had anything that she wanted to say, since she was also present.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. I just wanted to say many neighbors came out about this application. They spoke eloquently to every single detail and as to why though it was inappropriate. As I watched the presentation, which was an excellent presentation in terms of being very explanatory and understandable and depicted correctly, and I wish we had visuals, as I always ask for landmarks, because it's very pictures worth 1,000 words, and certainly in this case. But just to say this, when I was watching this, I agreed with everything the neighbors had said, but also to note, it almost made me angry. There was nothing about these changes that were appropriate. Every element suggested on the front facade was inappropriate for the building and the district. There was no regard, no respect for the history of it. And that was true on the rear facade. And so I think a unanimous disapproval by the committee was very appropriate. And I just hope that the full board supports that. Thank you.
Okay, so the question's been called. Thank you, Michelle.
Anyone opposed to calling the question?
Yeah.
I don't see any hands, so yeah, go ahead.
No, okay. Only one other point, and I think Michelle is right. We don't often get, and this does not say anything bad about the usual people who comment, but this was an unusually articulate and thoughtful group of neighbors commenting on the building, and I think that they and all of us on the committee seem to really feel that and notice that this particular group cared about the architecture and the appropriateness of the architecture, as well as having their light and air block. So I think that it was a very good, it was a good presentation, and it was a very good discussion afterwards. So I think we can vote.
Yep, secretaries.
If you're abstaining, voting no, or not voting for cause, please raise your hand. As a reminder for this vote, yes means no. Seeing none, the resolution passes. 43 yes, 0 no, 0 abstentions. Rebecca, was I wrong?
Yeah, we have someone away. I think we should just, it's unanimous.
We know it
but
passed.
we'll
It's a
just-
unanimous.
Yeah.
It's
So
unanimous.
fine. Let's keep going.
Okay. And then, of course, our last item was the only non-unanimous item, and this was also a disapproval. Effectively, the operators of the Guggenheim Museum retail store would like to renovate their space for reasons that frankly are beyond my understanding, and certainly happened before my time on the community board. This space was designated a landmark in 1990. In fact, most of the retail space was not even an indoor space until the mid 1970s. However, the committee felt strongly, not unanimously, excuse me, that the proposed alterations were inadequately responsive to the spirit of the rest of the museum. And so it was a disapproval. I have to say that I did not agree, and neither did our public member, Kimberly Selway. Not so much because I think that the proposal is appropriate, but more that I think that the discussion of the proposal as being not Frank Lloyd Wright-ish enough is in fact nonsensical. But clearly I was in the minority. So we have some comments. Marco.
Thank you, Anthony. I would like to say that I wish David Helper get the quick recuperation. I wish the best. Being said that, I'm going to say that, fellow community members, this is not another landmark application. This is an application to alter the interior of the Guggenheim Museum building, which is an interior and exterior landmark buildings. Few landmark buildings have this honorable status. Furthermore, this building was designed by the father of the modern architecture, Mr. Frank Lloyd Wright. Moreover, this building was declared Patrimony of the Humanity by the UNESCO. And what is very important to mention is the respectful nomination was not filed by any American institution. It was nominated by a European country. In short, our community is proud and lucky to have this unique and precious diamond shining around the world. Therefore, its preservation to maintain intact is paramount. One of the arguments on these applications are the conditions of the furniture that needs repair and or updated to improve their sales. This is not true because many of the national and international visitors are coming exclusively to admire this piece of art. Regardless of its physical condition, of the space, of the furniture, then sales never will be affected. A good example is Mr. Wright's Falling Water House. When I visited, I saw their interiors and cabinets were very old since from the time that were built. And the number of visitors hasn't reduced. And most likely the sales never go down because all Mr. Wright's buildings designs are example and advisor for future generations of designers. Another argument on this alteration is that the section in question is not the original design of Mr. Wright. That is true. However, this applicant, in order to make his case, he said there are a serious alterations or lacerations on its interiors in the past to justify this modification. This argument could be used for future alterations. In brief, we need to stop these baseless arguments to avoid future lacerations on this piece of art. Consequently, we need to send a message to its administrator that Mr. Wright's building has to be maintained intact forever. Thank you.
This isn't Frank Lloyd Wright's building. I'm sorry, I had to say it. This is Charles Wathmey's building. Alita.
Thanks, Anthony. I know this is a tough one. It's not Frank Lloyd Wright's building, but it is connected to the museum, which we are very, as Marco pointed out, very, very lucky to have, and it is intact and it is gorgeous and it is unique. There should be a conversation between any building attached to it and the museum itself. At the University of Chicago, they own the Roby House, which is a Frank Lloyd Wright building full of very strong horizontal lines. When they built their business school in the last 10 or so years across the street from the Roby House, they had their architect create a building that was responsive to and reflective of the Frank Lloyd Wright building, the Roby House. And I believe very strongly that the gift shop should be having a conversation with the museum in the sense of the spirit of Frank Lloyd Wright. I'm not talking about, and I hate to use the word, it has been eliminated pretty much from my vocabulary, fake. It should not be a fake Frank Lloyd Wright building, but it should be somewhat more in conversation with it, more reflective of it, more responsive to it, and create the spirit, which is why people go to the museum to begin with. I don't believe everyone goes there for the art, but a lot of people go for the architecture. And it is a shame to have something that for whatever reasons is not the way it was originally built, outside, inside, but is there and people go to because it is part of the museum to be more responsive to the great architecture that is the museum. Thank you.
Thank you, Alita. Rami.
I'd like to make a substitute motion to approve.
Is there a second?
If not, I'll call the question.
Honestly, Anthony, I think we need to continue the discussion.
With that,
You can have it. You can continue. You can have a substitute motion and continue the discussion.
I think Chuck is clapping his hand, so I assume there's a second. That was a
Yes,
yes.
there's two
Okay.
seconds at least.
Okay.
Addison and Chuck.
Okay, anyway, Elizabeth next.
Yes, Anthony said, it is absolutely true. This is not part of Frank Lloyd Wright's building. It is in a building that desecrates Frank Lloyd Wright's building. Frank Lloyd Wright, this is a very significant pair of buildings. It is against what Frank Lloyd Wright said about his building. He said something to the effect of, at last he's removed the rectilinear frame of reference. This is a rectangular building. It offends Frank Lloyd Wright's building, and it offends what he intended to do. And this is one of the most significant Frank Lloyd Wright buildings, and he's hardly a minor architect from outer space. I think that it's absurd that we have a designated store in this appendage, and as far as I'm concerned, I voted against it because I think just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I think we have Michelle next, then Elizabeth Rose.
I voted in favor of the disapproval because if you look at the store, and again, I wish we had the visuals, it looks like the modernization of any store along Madison Avenue. It's a very modern placement of the furniture, obviously set up for point of sale. It has nothing to do, it doesn't refer, even though it may not be the precise part of the original, this doesn't even refer to the original. So to my mind, it's completely inappropriate. And it's also not to say that these architects can't go back to the drawing board and come up with something appropriate. So it's not like we're wiping out, with this disapproval, we're not wiping out the possibility for the Guggenheim to have a bookstore. It has one now. And I'm sure there's a more appropriate way for them to approve upon the flow that's in it. But what they came up with was completely inappropriate to the building, to my mind. I urge you to support the disapproval.
Thank you, Michelle. Elizabeth Rose.
Well, Michelle has the advantage of me because she clearly has a sense of what the proposal looks like.
Well, we do supply visuals.
Thank you,
I
Jane.
downloaded the materials. I see what's presented. I have not a clue what current is versus what is proposed, and consequently, I don't have enough information here. So I will vote to disapprove simply because I really don't have a clear sense of what's current and what's proposed, and I have to kind of trust people on that. I just don't understand the materials.
Well, Elizabeth, you're
well
right.
enough.
They didn't show us any images of what the current configuration looks like. Thank you. They didn't show us any images of today.
Oh, no, that's not quite true, actually. But be that as it may. Chuck.
I was actually, to go back in history, I was actually involved in the fight against the construction of this addition to what was Frank Lloyd Wright Guggenheim Museum. And it was bitterly contested by all of Frank Lloyd Wright's associates who were around at the time. And so this building, you know, I'm with Anthony on this. This building is really not really a Frank Lloyd Wright building. It was Charles Gwathmey who did it. And it was, when it was first proposed, it was even worse. And I was involved in the fight against it and they scaled it back, but it's still not Frank Lloyd Wright. So I don't see any reason to say, well, we should disapprove this particularly because this building is not the Guggenheim Museum. And I'm going to support Rami's substitute motion. Not only not
thank you,
Guggenheim
Chuck.
Museum, it has not much relation to it except it happens to be sitting in the back of it.
David.
I'm one of those people who also bitterly fought the Gwathmey Field building. Terrible mistake by a very good architect. I did take a look at the drawings. They are not easy to understand. My question is, what are they doing? Look to me like they might be doing something at the glass facade. Are they changing the way the light comes in? Are they changing
Yes.
the relationship to the exterior?
Well, not really. The window, the single panel of glass that in that curtain wall that falls within the museum, falls within the bookstore, will still be there, still be transmitting light, but there will be a movable point of sale location to try and cut down on that dead end. That portion of the gift shop dead ends into that glass wall. The glass wall remains the same. It is the relationship of visitor to glass wall from the inside is different.
But from the outside, it'll appear the same.
It looks exactly the same. Yeah.
Anthony,
Thank
I
you,
know
David.
that Russell wants to bring this meeting to a close, but I want to just say one thing, David. That was why I actually abstained on this application. It had nothing to do with Gwathmey Siegel versus Frank Lloyd Wright. That wall, that glass wall at the end, is going to be covered mostly by what Anthony called a point of sale. It's actually a display case for merchandise. And that is the one whimsical thing that could have been kept in that space. And I just felt that was just too egregious for words. And I feel funny, I should probably be not voting for cause because the director of the museum is a very close person, a friend of mine. But putting that point of sale case in front of that window, they didn't have to do that.
Well,
I don't
thank you
think
for
that's a
that
conflict,
explanation,
just
Jane,
data.
because that's sort of what I read in the drawings.
Yeah.
So I would not want to lose that transparency.
But I don't think that's a conflict, Jane, under the rules.
Okay, so that's why I abstained. I didn't.
Okay. I don't know how we do this since we have.
I'm
this
calling the
substitute
question.
motion.
That's why my hand is up.
Okay, that's fine. So we're calling a question on the disapproval?
On the approval, no, the substitute is the one that's on the table.
Oh, okay.
If there's a
So-
second.
Oh, yeah,
Yes,
there's
Rami
a second.
seconds. Okay, great. All right.
Which secretary is doing this one? So Andrea, is that you? Just go ahead and unmute. There you go.
Okay. Please raise your hand if you're voting no, abstaining, or not voting for cause.
This is the approval, so yes means yes for this one.
Thank you, Russell. Marco?
Marco.
Yes means yes, no? So that means I'm gonna vote no.
Barbara?
No.
Russell?
Sorry, Russell, I accidentally muted you.
I see that. No.
Felice?
No.
Michelle?
No.
Elizabeth?
No.
Alita?
No.
Jane?
Abstain.
Valerie?
No.
Ed?
No.
Rita?
No.
Elizabeth Ashby?
Sorry, I had to deal with my puppy dog. Are we voting on the approval or disapproval?
Approval.
Are we voting to approve or voting to
Voting to
disapprove?
approve. Yes means yes. No means no.
Okay. We're voting to disapprove.
No, we're voting to
No.
approve. This is a vote
Sorry?
on, this is a vote to approve. So yes means yes to the proposal. No means
Okay,
no
no,
to the proposal.
no, thank you.
Yeah, no. against it.
Evan, sorry.
No.
Gail,
No.
Vanessa,
No.
David,
No.
Billy,
No.
Margaret,
No.
Sherry,
No.
John,
No.
Rebecca,
No.
Lynn,
No.
Craig,
No.
Andrew. I said it right.
No.
Lori,
No.
And while we wait for the tally on that, I'm calling the question on the
Jane.
original motion.
Jane, partial. No, okay. Okay, multiple hands up. Okay, so I'm a no as well, Sandra. Is that it for this?
Yeah, that's it for this vote.
I'll be back with a tally.
Okay. So as I said, I called the question on the original motion. I think Billy seconded it. It looks like Marco also.
Okay, so I will take this one. This is back to the original motion, which is a disapproval. So a yes means a no. Rami,
Actually, I changed my vote. I'm voting yes.
okay, so we're not counting you. Okay. Anthony,
No.
Judy,
No.
Addison,
No. No.
Mohit,
No.
Jeff,
No.
Addison, did you want to change your vote or did you accidentally re-raise your hand?
Sorry, that was a mistake. My bad.
No worries. So the disapproval passes. Oh, Jane?
I'm sorry, did you get me as an abstention, Rebecca?
Yep.
Thank you.
I'm not going to prematurely read the tally, but I'll have it ready for you soon.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Landworks co-chairs, and thank you, Anthony, for pitching in too. All right, so let's do. We still have the executive session item, which we're going to do at the very end. So I want to do any old or new business now before we head to that. So Anthony, you have your hand up.
I do. Thank you. And I think this is new business, but it's also in a way old business. And this has to do with a conversation that we had at one of the budget meetings, budget committee meetings, about paying our consultant for the zoning and development committees, for actually the full boards, efforts to create 2 special districts on the Upper East Side with height limits and support for affordable housing and local retail. And so the consultant was paid last year in part with funds from the city council members, and we sort of discussed that would be something we would be looking to continue to do this year. And I think we'd like to continue this vital project. And in order to do that, we need to assign funds to a new agreement that would be essentially identical to last year's. And I was just wondering how we can push that along and get that done.
Yeah, so I think we should take it up in the budget committee and as I mentioned in
I
your
think
email, I think
we're a
that's
little
gonna do it.
concerned that I hear you and I don't disagree. I think that, and we can talk about this offline, but we're concerned that the budget committee may not meet again until October, and then it starts to,
Well, let's talk. Okay, yeah. Look, I mean, I don't think we've had really any specific discussions about scheduling. So, and I don't know that we've looked into trying to find an earlier time. So we can talk offline about trying to find a time and to try
okay,
and do it
let's
earlier
do
and all
that,
that.
because
I mean, it's a scheduling issue.
I think it's essential. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
it's essential. Okay.
Yeah. Let's talk about we can work on scheduling it. Okay. Rebecca.
I will just say, I believe at the last budget committee meeting, they did discuss trying to have a September meeting in addition to an October meeting for the district needs statement. So I would just email the co-chairs, Felice and Billy, and maybe they can add that to the agenda. This isn't really new or old business. It's just a reminder that when we go into executive session, the secretaries will be retaking the attendance. We'll do it as quickly as possible. But just in case someone makes a motion really quickly, I want you to know that we do have to make sure everyone who's there is there. Thanks.
All right. Mrs. Brown.
Thank you. Just in case somebody makes a motion to adjourn, I just wanted to get my 2 cents in under new business. There's been discussion in Albany and City Hall to discontinue early voting. It appears that this year will be the last year for early voting because the cost does not outweigh the lack of attendance. So I just want to remind everyone, early voting starts August the 11th through the 21st, and the primary is on the 23rd. And these are for federal seats. Please let your neighbors, your friends know about early voting if it's important to you to keep. Thank you.
This is the primary for Congress and state Senate is the one that you're talking about. So
yeah, primary. Thank you.
Barbara.
I always do it too fast. I'm just going to make a personal thing. I just read Russell's email inviting us to a social next week. Can I urge everybody to do it? I feel like it's been 3 years of people that we haven't met. And I just think getting to know each other in a more social way would be great. So I really hope that people show up for it. And I hope we can invite our public members and some of the electeds and so on that have been important to our community.
Yeah, the public members were all invited. Thank you for that reminder. Elizabeth.
Yes, on getting funding for our planner, it is not only essential, but it's an immediate need. First, Second, Third, and York Avenues are the only avenues or side streets on the Upper East Side that do not have a protection of a height limit.
We'll discuss it. Yeah, I apologize. I don't want to interrupt. I apologize for interrupting, but we will get it in the schedule. We'll figure out a time to do the meeting. I'm not trying to push it off to October. I don't think there's been any discussion yet about when it's going to be. So we can try to schedule it as soon as we can. Let's just coordinate with the budget committee and you guys, and we'll find a time for the meeting.
Okay. This really has gone on for too long. For many years, the need is dire.
Understood. Understood.
Expeditious is necessary. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. Gail.
I won't belabor the point, but that money for the planner, 15,005 from Keith and 10 from Julie, that is money that was earmarked for the planner. And it was discussed at the budget meeting, and had Will not explained that that's what the money would be used for, one of us would have proposed that we allocate the other $19,999 for TUC, just to let you know, because I realize you might not have been at that meeting if I recall correctly.
Okay, we'll
Okay,
take it up in the committee.
okay. Thank you.
Ed, you got it.
Thanks, Russell. The reason I raised my hand is the follow-up on Mrs. Brown. 2 points, and Russell, you already pointed it out. For folks who don't know, State Senate is up for primary in August. But I will point out, with respect to the early voting, yeah, people have been talking about it. An article was written. New York has the shortest amount of early voting in the nation. For those who are up on the issue, we don't talk about it at the Voting Reform Task Force. Our 9 days are shorter than a lot of jurisdictions. I know last night you told me all to be quiet because the eyes glaze over. I'm just a nerd because I'm an election attorney. But if you want to talk offline about it, I can send it to you. But the one thing I will say, just as a PSA for those in the public who are still here, the Southern District, Justice Ronnie Abrams, I should say, issued a ruling last week on the DCCC, Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee's lawsuit. Only one issue they raised was upheld regarding absentee voting. Again, you can reach out to me if you're on the board. Hopefully we'll have the memo from the state Senate posted about it. But, with respect to that absentee voting, I implore everybody to please show up, because that will keep early voting going. And just on a personal level, it is absolutely just.
You guys can take it up.
That we're at
Take it
10%
up.
voting.
Yeah. You guys can take it up in the task force.
No, we
too, if
don't
you
have
wanna look
time
into
for
it.
that. We won't have time before the meeting. So we won't have a meeting before the primary, Russell. That's the reason I bring it up. Just as a PSA, folks, please, 10%.
Yeah, I don't think they're talking about changing early voting for this time. That's not.
No, they're not. But just pointing that out.
So that's the issue. Okay, so Rebecca.
Move to executive session.
Second.
So I gather we're up to that item. So yeah, okay. Let's do it. So just thank you everybody in the public who joined us. We're now going to move into executive session to talk about a board personnel issue that's not a public thing. So members of the public can go. The members of the board are going to go into executive session now, along with Will, and that will be that. So thank you to the members of the public who joined. And yeah, and Will, if you can put us into executive session, please, that'd be great.
Yeah, so board members, you're gonna see in a couple of, in 60 seconds less, a prompt asking you to go to a breakout room. Whenever I open it, I would ask that you journey over there, please. And yes, we do need to come back into the room to adjourn. So the room will stay open. The main meeting room will stay open and streaming while we are gone. 1 second, everyone. Russell, go ahead and mute.
Thank you. Okay, we're back. Would anyone like to adjourn? Rami has his hand up.
So moved.
Okay, we got some seconds. Excellent. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. See you next time. Hopefully see you all next week.